Picture yourself in a small boat, alone on a vast and turbulent ocean. This is not a peaceful sea. It is a chaotic, unpredictable storm. The waves that crash against your hull are immense and relentless. One wave is the 24/7 news cycle, a constant torrent of crisis and conflict. Another wave is the pressure of economic uncertainty. A third is the disorienting swirl of social and political division, pushing and pulling you in every direction. All the while, a cold, stinging spray of digital notifications, emails, and endless demands mists the air, making it impossible to see clearly. In this boat, you are rowing frantically. Your muscles ache, your energy is gone, and you feel that with every stroke, you are simply trying to keep from being swamped, to keep your head above water for one more moment. You feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and profoundly alone. This small boat is our mind, and this chaotic sea is the world we now inhabit. The storm is no longer just outside of us. It has breached our defenses. The world's chaos has become our mind's chaos. It manifests as a constant, low-grade anxiety, a feeling of being spread too thin, a quiet hum of dread about what the next wave might bring. It flares as the sharp anger of helplessness, the frustration of watching events unfold that are far beyond our control. In response, we try to fight the storm itself. We paddle furiously into the waves of online arguments. We exhaust ourselves by compulsively tracking every threatening news story. We try to build walls of distraction and busyness to keep the water out. But these efforts only leave us more tired, more battered, more lost at sea. But what if the goal was never to calm the ocean? The ocean will do what it does. What if the path to peace was never about controlling the storm? What if, instead, it was about becoming a better sailor and building a stronger boat? There exists an ancient, time-tested science of the mind, a profound psychology preserved in the contemplative traditions of the world that offers us precisely this. It provides a toolkit, not for changing the chaotic nature of the world, but for radically transforming our relationship to it. It teaches us how to reinforce the hull of our own mind, how to mend our sails, and how to read the winds with wisdom instead of panic. It suggests that no matter how violently the storm may rage, there exists within every boat, within every one of us, a place of perfect stillness, a calm and silent center. This is not a journey of escape. It is a journey of discovery. It is the path of learning how to find the eye of the storm within our own hearts, and how to build a sanctuary of peace that no external chaos can ever wash away. We have established the scene. A small boat, our mind, tossed on the chaotic ocean of the modern world. We feel the relentless force of the waves, the crises, the conflicts, the pressures, and our immediate conclusion is that the storm itself is the cause of our suffering. If only the ocean would calm down, we think, then we would find peace. But this is the first and most fundamental misunderstanding on the path to inner stillness. The path begins with a courageous shift in perspective. It asks us to consider a radical proposition. The storm is not the primary problem. Our frantic, panicked, and unskillful reaction to the storm is. The world, in all its chaos, is merely a trigger. The real drama, the real suffering, is generated entirely within the echo chamber of our own minds. This is the domain of what we can call the reactive mind. To understand this mechanism is the first step toward taking back our power, toward learning that even in the roughest seas, we can find a deep and unshakable stability within our own vessel. To see this distinction clearly, consider a simple scenario. Two people are sitting in their respective homes. A news alert flashes on both of their phones, with the same alarming headline about a political or economic crisis. The external event, the stimulus, is identical for both. The first person's heart immediately begins to race. A surge of anger and fear courses through their body. Their mind is instantly hijacked by a torrent of catastrophic thoughts. This is terrible. The world is falling apart. I have to do something. They spend the next hour frantically scrolling through social media, getting into heated arguments in comment sections, their mind consumed by outrage and their body locked in a state of high alert. The second person sees the same headline. They feel a moment of concern, a tightening in the chest. They acknowledge the seriousness of the situation, but then they take one conscious, deep breath. They remind themselves that their panicked reaction will not solve the crisis. They put their phone down and turn their attention to making their children breakfast, engaging with the present moment with a sense of purpose and calm. At the end of that hour, the first person is exhausted, agitated, and feels more hopeless than before. The second person, while still aware of the world's problems, remains grounded and at peace. The external storm was the same. The inner weather was entirely different. This simple example reveals the most empowering truth we can ever learn. We cannot control the chaotic events of the world, but we have the potential to control our response to them. The source of our peace is not out there, it is in here. This reactive process is not a personal failing. It is a deep biological inheritance. Hardwired into the most ancient part of our brain is a small, almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of the amygdala as our mind's primitive smoke detector or threat alarm. Its sole job is to constantly scan our environment for signs of danger, and when it perceives a threat, it triggers a powerful, instantaneous, and life-saving cascade of events, known as the fight, flight, or freeze response. In the prehistoric world where our brains evolved, this system was a masterpiece of design. If our ancestor was walking through the savannah and saw the flicker of a saber-toothed tiger in the bushes, there was no time for careful deliberation. The amygdala would instantly hijack the rational brain, flooding the body with adrenaline and cortisol. The heart would pump faster, blood would be diverted to the large muscles, and our ancestor would be ready to fight for their life or run for safety. This immediate, unthinking reaction is what kept us alive. The problem is that we are now navigating the complexities of the 21st century with this same ancient, primitive alarm system. Our amygdala has not had an upgrade. It cannot tell the difference between a genuine threat to our physical survival, like a tiger, and a symbolic or psychological threat, like an angry email from our boss, a political headline that challenges our worldview, or a critical comment on our social media post. It interprets all of these as tigers. Our modern digital environment has become a savanna of endless symbolic tigers. Every notification ping, every piece of outrage-inducing content, every alarming news alert is a signal that our amygdala interprets as a threat that must be met with a state of high alert. We are living our lives in a state of chronic, low-grade fight or flight. Our bodies are perpetually tensed, our hearts are perpetually racing, our minds are perpetually vigilant. The rational, thoughtful part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, is constantly being bypassed by this more primitive, reactive system. The long-term costs of living this way are immense. It leads to chronic stress, anxiety disorders, high blood pressure, and a profound sense of mental and physical exhaustion. We are being worn down, not by the tigers themselves, but by the endless, exhausting cycle of our own internal false alarms. There is a simple parable that perfectly illustrates this self-perpetuating cycle of reactivity. A young, fiery dog wanders into a vast, empty canyon. Feeling bold, it lets out a single sharp bark. From across the canyon, the echo returns its bark perfectly. The dog's amygdala instantly fires. It perceives a challenge, another dog daring to bark back at it. It bristles and barks again, this time more aggressively, more menacingly. The echo, of course, returns its bark with the exact same increased aggression. The dog is now convinced it is being threatened by a hostile and powerful rival. It descends into a frantic rage, barking furiously, running back and forth, its own angry sounds echoing back at it from all directions, confirming its fearful belief that it is surrounded by enemies. For hours, it fights this battle, a battle born entirely of its own reactive energy, until finally it collapses in a heap of utter exhaustion. An old, wise dog, watching from a quiet hilltop, understands the truth. The canyon was always empty. The young dog was not fighting a pack of enemies. It was only fighting the echo of its own voice. We, in our engagement with the chaotic world, are so often this young dog. An event happens the first echo. Our reactive mind immediately barks back with anger, fear, or judgment. The world, especially in the echo chambers of social media, reflects our own energy back to us. We see our aggression met with more aggression, and we bark back even louder, convinced of the righteousness of our position and the hostility of the world. We exhaust ourselves in these pointless battles, never realizing that we are often just fighting with the reflection of our own agitated mind. This experience of being hijacked by our own reactive mind is one of profound helplessness. It is that all too familiar feeling of having lost control, of having said or typed something in the heat of the moment that we almost immediately regret. It feels as if someone else took over, some more primitive, less skillful version of ourselves. And living under the constant threat of this inner hijacking is deeply, wearyingly exhausting. It is not just a physical tiredness, it is a spiritual weariness, a sense that we are being worn down by the constant vigilance and emotional turbulence of our own minds. This exhaustion, over time, can curdle into cynicism and despair. We begin to believe that the world is simply a chaotic and threatening place, and that we are powerless to do anything about it. We may shut down, become numb, and retreat into the freeze response, which is the final stage of a nervous system that can no longer sustain the energy of fight or flight. This is the ultimate cost of living a life dictated by unchecked reactivity. We lose our joy, our resilience, and our sense of agency. The good news, the central promise of this entire path, is that this is not a life sentence. This reactive mechanism, though deeply ingrained, is not who we are. It is simply a habit of the mind. And like any habit, it can be seen, it can be understood, and with gentle, patient practice, it can be changed. The key to our freedom, the first step in building a stronger boat, lies in discovering how to create a sacred pause between the world's stimulus and our own reaction, between the echo and our bark. The journey now turns to the discovery of the tools that make this pause possible. We have seen how our own reactive minds can hijack our peace, turning the external chaos of the world into a raging inner storm. We are caught in a self-perpetuating cycle of stimulus and reaction, exhausting ourselves by barking at the echoes of our own agitation. To break this cycle, we need to look more closely at the very nature of our suffering. We need a lens that can help us distinguish between the pain that life inevitably brings and the suffering that we unwittingly create for ourselves. The Buddha, in a short but profoundly insightful discourse known as the Salatha Sutta, provided just such a lens. He offered a simple, powerful metaphor that is one of the most practical and psychologically astute teachings for navigating a difficult world: the metaphor of the two arrows. He taught that to live a human life is to be subject to being struck by arrows. But the path of wisdom, he explained, is about learning to be struck by only one arrow, not two. Understanding the difference between these two arrows is the key to unlocking a new and revolutionary relationship with our own pain and with the chaos of the world. The first arrow, the Buddha taught, is the unavoidable, inevitable, and often painful reality of human existence. It is the raw impact of life as it happens. The first arrow is receiving a difficult medical diagnosis. It is losing a job you depended on. It is the sharp pang of grief when a relationship ends. It is the physical pain of a migraine headache, a chronic illness, or even a stubbed toe. In our modern context, first arrows fly at us constantly. It is the stressful email from your boss landing in your inbox. It is the news headline announcing another tragedy or crisis. It is the car that cuts you off in traffic, the unexpected bill that arrives in the mail, the critical comment someone leaves on your social media post. These first arrows are, to a large extent, outside of our control. They are the given circumstances of our lives, the texture of reality itself. The path of wisdom does not promise a magical shield that will protect us from all first arrows. Such a shield does not exist. To be alive is to be vulnerable, to be subject to gain and loss, pleasure and pain, sickness, aging, and death. No amount of meditation or positive thinking will change this fundamental contract of human life. The first arrow is simply the clean, impersonal pain of what is. The real problem, the source of the vast majority of our enduring misery, begins with the second arrow. The second arrow is the one we fire at ourselves. It is our reaction to the first arrow. It is the story we tell ourselves about the pain. It is the layer of mental and emotional suffering we add on top of the initial clean pain. Let us return to our examples. The first arrow is losing your job. The pain is real there, is fear about the future, a sense of loss. But then, we fire the second arrow. We begin a mental tirade. I am a complete failure. I'm worthless. Why does this always happen to me? It's so unfair. My boss was always out to get me. This is the arrow of self-judgment, of blame, of catastrophic thinking, of victimhood. The initial pain of job loss is now compounded by the immense suffering of shame and rage. Or consider the first arrow of a physical headache. The raw sensation is unpleasant, but then comes the second arrow. Oh no, not again. My whole day is ruined. I can't cope with this. What if it's a brain tumor? Why now, when I have so much to do? This is the arrow of resistance, of anxiety, and of future-oriented worry. The physical pain is now magnified 100-fold by the mental anguish we have layered on top of it. The second arrow is the voice of the unobserved mind, the frantic storytelling of the ego trying to make sense of a painful event. This storytelling almost always takes one of several forms. It can be resistance. This shouldn't be happening. This is a mental argument with reality, a futile battle that we can never win, and that only creates immense tension and frustration. It can be blame, either directed outward, it's all their fault, or inward, it's all my fault. Both are forms of anger that poison the mind. Or it can be catastrophizing, taking a single painful event and spinning it into a narrative of permanent, personal ruin. My life is over now. The suffering created by these second arrows, the shame, the guilt, the resentment, the despair, the anxiety is almost always far more intense and lasts far longer than the clean pain of the first arrow. The first arrow strikes and is gone. The wound from the second arrow can fester for days, weeks, years, or even a lifetime. When we apply this model to our modern, chaotic world, we can see why so many of us feel perpetually overwhelmed. Our hyper-connected digital environment is a machine designed to fire first arrows at us with the speed and intensity of a machine gun. Every notification, every email, every news update, every curated image of someone else's perfect life is a potential first arrower, tiny sting of stress, a flicker of envy, a jolt of outrage, a pang of inadequacy. Because these arrows are flying at us with such relentless frequency, we have become incredibly well practiced at the reflex of firing the second arrow. Our minds are conditioned for it. An alarming headline strikes, and before we can even feel the initial impact, we have already launched the second arrow of fearful projection. A social media post triggers a feeling of envy, and we immediately fire the second arrow of self-criticism. We are living under a constant, self-inflicted volley of our own painful reactions. We are in a state of chronic inner warfare, and we wonder why we are so exhausted. It is not just the chaos of the world that is draining us. It is the immense energy we expend by constantly resisting, judging, commentating on, and telling stories about that chaos. So how do we stop? How do we learn to be struck by the inevitable first arrows of life without immediately turning our own bow upon ourselves? The answer lies in the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness, in this context, is the skill of creating a space between the first arrow and the second arrow. It is the development of the ability to feel the clean impact of the first arrow without launching into the dirty, complicated suffering of the second. In practice, it looks like this. A first arrow strikes. Let's say you receive a curt, critical email from a colleague. Your habitual reaction might be to immediately fire a second arrow. Your heart races, you feel a flush of anger, and you start mentally composing a defensive, angry reply. The mindful approach is different. The moment you feel the sting of that email, you pause. You consciously choose not to react immediately. Instead, you turn your attention inward. You bring your awareness to your body, and you simply notice the raw, physical sensations of the first arrow's impact. You might notice a tightness in your chest, a knot in your stomach, a feeling of heat in your face, and your only job, in that moment, is to breathe with those sensations, to acknowledge them with a gentle, non-judgmental awareness. There is tightness in the chest. There is heat. This is what the sting of criticism feels like in the body. By staying with the direct, physical, wordless experience of the first arrow, you are doing something radical. You are refusing to provide the monkey mind with the fuel it needs to launch into its story, to fire the second arrow. The mind wants to spin a narrative of blame and justification, but you keep gently bringing your attention back to the simple, clean sensations in your body. And what you discover is something miraculous. The raw pain of the first arrow, when it is met with this kind of mindful acceptance, is not unbearable. It is just energy. It arises, it crests, and, if you allow it to, it passes. It is the second arrow, the story of how dare they, the story of this is unfair, that is truly unbearable. The pain of the first arrow is like a clean wound. It hurts, but it can heal. The suffering of the second arrow is like repeatedly rubbing dirt and poison into that wound, ensuring it becomes infected and never heals properly. The wisdom of the second arrow is one of the most practical and liberating gifts of this entire path. It returns to us our own agency. We are not merely helpless victims being peppered by the arrows of a chaotic world. While we may not be able to stop all the first arrows from flying our way, we can, with conscious, compassionate practice, learn to put down our own bow. We can learn to tend to the initial wound with kindness, rather than immediately stabbing ourselves again in the same spot. This is the beginning of true resilience, true strength, and a peace that is not dependent on the world being free of arrows. Having seen that our own reactive minds and the stories we tell ourselves are the true source of our suffering, we must ask a practical question. Where do we go to find refuge? When we are lost in the painful narrative of the second arrow, when our thoughts are spiraling into anxiety and catastrophic thinking, where is the safe ground? The answer is as simple as it is profound. We leave the treacherous territory of the head, and we come home to the safe harbor of the body. Consider for a moment the nature of anxiety. When you are worried, when you are ruminating, when you are lost in fearful projections about the future, where are you? You are not here, in the present moment. You have become a disembodied consciousness, a ghost living in a virtual reality constructed entirely of thought. You have floated up into the abstract and turbulent weather of your mind, and you have lost your mooring to the solid, stable earth of your own physical being. Our modern world encourages this disembodiment. We spend our days as brains in front of screens, treating our bodies as little more than inconvenient vehicles that need to be occasionally refueled and rested. The chaotic nature of the world with its endless stream of abstract information, economic forecasts, political polling, distant conflicts, spulls us further and further away from the simple, tangible reality of our own direct experience. The path to finding peace in a chaotic world, therefore, begins with the radical act of embodiment. It is the conscious journey home to ourselves, a return to the wisdom, truth, and unshakable ground of the body. The trap we fall into is the trap of abstraction. The anxious mind does not deal in reality, it deals in stories about reality. It takes a single fact and weaves it into a terrifying narrative. The mind obsesses over what might happen, what could happen, what should have happened. This world of thought is, by its nature, groundless. It has no substance. It is a phantom realm where we can torment ourselves endlessly with possibilities that may never come to pass. To live in this realm is to be like a tree with no roots, top-heavy and vulnerable, ready to be toppled by the slightest wind of bad news or uncertainty. The body, in stark contrast, is the realm of the concrete. It is always, and only, in the present moment. The mind can worry about tomorrow's meeting, but the feeling of the breath entering your lungs is happening now. The mind can regret yesterday's conversation, but the feeling of your feet on the floor is happening now. The body speaks the simple, unadorned, and honest truth of the present moment. It does not tell stories. It simply reports sensations: warmth, coolness, tingling, pressure, tightness, release. To ground ourselves in this tangible reality is to pull the plug on the mind's abstract horror movie. It is to find solid ground in a world that feels increasingly groundless. The most powerful and systematic way to practice this homecoming is through the meditation of the body scan. This is not just a relaxation exercise. It is a profound training in presence and grounding. Let us begin this practice now. Find a posture that allows you to be comfortable, either sitting in a chair or lying down. Let your eyes gently close and take a few deep breaths, feeling your body settle with each exhalation. The goal here is not to feel anything special, not to achieve a state of bliss, but simply to feel what is already here. Let's begin by bringing our full attention to the points of contact between our body and the world. Feel the precise sensation of your feet resting on the floor. Notice the texture of your socks, the temperature, the subtle sense of pressure. Feel the weight of your body being held by the chair or the bed. Let yourself feel truly supported, as if you could release your full weight into the earth beneath you. Think of this as dropping anchor. You are anchoring your awareness in the simple, undeniable reality of physical contact. For a mind that feels scattered and blown about by the winds of chaos, this simple act alone can bring an immediate sense of stability. Now, let us begin a gentle journey. Bring your awareness, like a soft, warm light, all the way down to the toes of your left foot. You don't need to visualize them. Try to feel them from the inside. Can you feel any sensation at all? Pulsing, tingling, warmth, numbness? If you feel nothing, that is perfectly fine. Simply be aware of the absence of sensation. There is no right or wrong experience. There is only awareness. Then, slowly, allow that beam of awareness to expand, to include the sole of your foot, your heel, your ankle. We are not in a hurry. We are simply exploring the territory of our own being. Then, gently guide your awareness up your lower leg, into your knee, and through your entire thigh, just noticing, just feeling, just this. The mind will surely try to interrupt. It will tell you this is boring. It will offer you a worry or a plan. When this happens, simply notice that the mind has wandered, and then, with the kindness you would show a lost puppy, gently guide it back to the part of the body you are exploring. Now, shift your awareness to your right leg, beginning the same patient, curious journey from the toes, all the way up to the hip. Bring your awareness now into the core of your body, the pelvis, the abdomen. Feel the gentle, rhythmic rise and fall of your belly with each breath. This is the rhythm of life, a steady, calming presence right at your center. Then, move the light of your awareness up into your chest and across your lower and upper back. This is an area where we often carry the physical burden of our stress. If you notice tightness or tension, your task is not to fight it or force it to relax. Your task is simply to meet it with a soft, accepting awareness. As you breathe in, imagine you could send your breath directly into the area of tension. As you breathe out, simply invite it to soften, to let go. You are not commanding it. You are creating the kind and safe conditions for it to release on its own. Now let your awareness flow down your arms, into your hands, feeling the exquisite sensitivity of your fingertips. Finally, bring your awareness to your neck, your jaw, and your face. Gently notice any clenching in the jaw, any furrowing of the brow. Invite these tiny, habitual muscles to be soft, and for a few moments, feel your entire body as one single, unified field of sensation, breathing, humming, and vibrantly alive in this present moment. There is a powerful story from Greek mythology that illustrates the wisdom of this practice. The tale of Antaeus, a giant of immense power who was the son of Gaia, the goddess of the earth. Antaeus was invincible in combat, but he had a secret. His strength came directly from his contact with his mother, the earth. Each time an opponent would wound him or throw him to the ground, he would spring back up, his power fully renewed, his wounds instantly healed. The hero Heracles, tasked with defeating him, was baffled by this until he realized the giant's secret. To defeat Antaeus, Heracles had to do something radical. He had to lift him up into the air, completely separating him from the ground, from his source of power. Only there, held aloft in the empty air, could the giant finally be defeated. We, in our modern lives, are Antaeus. Our minds, when they are lifted up into the abstract, empty air of anxiety, of catastrophic thinking, of what-if scenarios, lose their grounding and their strength. We become vulnerable, weak, and easily defeated by the chaos of the world. Our body is our Mother Earth. It is our ever-present source of stability, strength, and resilience. Each time we consciously bring our awareness back to the tangible, physical sensations of our own body, we are, like Antaeus, touching the ground. We are reconnecting with our source of power. The chaotic world will constantly try to lift us up into the air of abstraction. The practice of embodiment is the art of keeping our feet planted firmly on the earth. As we practice this homecoming regularly, a new sensitivity begins to develop. The body becomes our wisest and most reliable barometer for our inner state. We start to notice the very first, subtle stirrings of stress and anxiety long before they become a full-blown storm. We no longer wait for the panic attack to realize we are anxious. We notice the first slight clenching in the jaw. We feel the first flutter of tightness in the stomach. We sense the subtle impulse to hold our breath. The body gives us early warning signals, and because we can detect the inner weather changing, we can respond skillfully. When we feel that first knot of anxiety, we can pause and take 3 deep, conscious breaths. When we notice the tension in our shoulders, we can consciously invite them to drop. We learn to respond to the body's first whisper so that it never has to shout at us with the voice of illness or burnout. We move from being a victim of our anxiety to being its compassionate caretaker. In a world that feels increasingly disconnected and groundless, the most powerful, sane, and radical act of self-care is to return again and again to the ground of our own being. Our body is not a problem to be solved or an object to be perfected. It is our constant refuge, our wisest teacher, and our most faithful home. Having returned to the solid ground of the body, we have found a place of refuge from the abstract storms of the mind. inhabiting our physical form, gives us stability and roots us in the present moment. Yet, there is a tool even more immediate, more portable, and more intimate that is always at our disposal. We do not always have the luxury of doing a full body scan in the middle of a stressful meeting or when faced with a sudden crisis. In these moments, we need a refuge we can access in an instant. We need an anchor that can be dropped the very second we feel the boat of our awareness beginning to capsize. This anchor, our most faithful and reliable companion on the journey of life, is the breath. The breath is the bridge between the body and the mind, the rhythm that underlies our entire existence. And learning to work with it skillfully is perhaps the single most powerful and practical thing we can do to find peace in the midst of chaos. It is our constant, ever-present, and unbreakable storm anchor. Imagine a scenario that is all too common in our modern world. You are at your desk, trying to focus. A notification flashes on your screen, an alarming news headline, a market downturn, a political bombshell. Simultaneously, an email arrives from your boss with an unexpected and urgent demand, its tone sharp and critical. In that instant, what happens? The first arrow strikes. The ancient threat detection system of your amygdala fires. Before you have even had a chance to formulate a conscious thought, your body is already reacting. Your heart rate quickens, your shoulders tense up and move toward your ears. You might notice that you are holding your breath, or that it has become shallow and rapid. Your mind begins to race, hijacked by a cascade of second arrows. This is a disaster. I can't handle this. I'm going to fail. The world is going crazy. In this critical moment, this junction point between the stimulus and our habitual suffering, the breath offers us an immediate and powerful circuit breaker. The single, simple act of consciously turning your attention away from the screen and towards the physical sensation of your own breathing is a radical act of liberation. It breaks the hypnotic spell of the external trigger. It yanks the mind out of its catastrophic future projections and anchors it firmly back into the present moment reality of your own body. You cannot breathe in the future. You cannot breathe in the past. To feel your breath is to be here. Now, in this space, you have reclaimed your power. You have moved from being a helpless victim of the storm to being a conscious sailor who has taken hold of the tiller. The reason this simple act is so profoundly effective is not a matter of wishful thinking or New Age philosophy. It is rooted in the deep, biological wisdom of our own nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system, which controls all the automatic functions of our body, has two main branches that exist in a delicate balance. The first is the sympathetic nervous system. You can think of this as the body's gas pedal. When we perceive a threat, this system kicks into gear. It releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. It increases our heart rate and blood pressure, tenses our muscles, and diverts energy to our limbs in preparation for intense physical action. This is the fight or flight response. The chaotic, demanding, and constantly on nature of the modern world means that for many of us, our foot is jammed on this gas pedal all day long. We are living in a state of chronic sympathetic nervous system activation, and it is burning us out. The second branch is the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the body's brake pedal. It is often called the rest and digest, or feed and breed system. When this system is dominant, our heart rate slows, our blood pressure drops, our muscles relax, and our body can dedicate its resources to essential long-term projects like digestion, healing, and restoring its own tissues. It is a state of safety, calm, and recovery. The key to activating this braking system lies in the breath. The longest and most influential nerve of the parasympathetic system is called the vagus nerve. It wanders from the brainstem down through the neck and into the chest and abdomen, connecting to the heart, the lungs, and the digestive organs. Crucially, It runs right through our diaphragm, the primary muscle of respiration. When we begin to consciously change the rhythm of our breathing, especially when we make our exhalations slightly longer than our inhalation, we are physically stimulating this vagus nerve. This sends a direct, powerful, and undeniable biological signal back to the brain that says, "The emergency is over, the tiger is gone, you are safe. You can stand down." This is why we cannot simply think our way into calm when we are in the grip of a reactive state. The rational mind is offline, but we can breathe our way into calm. We can use the body to speak to the brain in a language it cannot ignore. Knowing this, we can equip ourselves with simple, practical breathing techniques that can be used as an emergency brake in any chaotic moment. The first and simplest is what we can call the 3 conscious breaths. The moment you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed, stressed, or angry, just stop, pause whatever you are doing. Now, take a slow, deep inhalation through your nose, feeling your belly expand first, then your chest. Then, exhale even more slowly, perhaps through your mouth with a soft whoosh sound, as if you are blowing gently through a straw. Feel your shoulders drop as you exhale. Do this just 3 times. That is the entire practice. It can be done in less than a minute. It can be done in a crowded meeting, while stopped at a red light, or standing in a grocery line. No one even needs to know you are doing it. Yet this simple act is often enough to deactivate the fight or flight response and create the precious space you need to respond to the situation with wisdom instead of raw reactivity. A second, slightly more structured practice that is incredibly effective at calming and focusing the mind is box breathing. This technique is so reliable that it is used by first responders, elite soldiers, and athletes to regulate their nervous systems under extreme pressure. It is very simple to learn. You are creating a box with your breath, with each side being of equal length. You begin by gently exhaling all the air from your lungs. Then, you inhale slowly and smoothly through your nose for a count of 4. Then, you hold the breath gently at the top without clamping down for a count of 4. Next, you exhale slowly and smoothly through your nose or mouth for a count of 4. And finally, you hold the breath out at the bottom, again without creating tension, for a count of 4. That completes 1 box. You can then continue this cycle for a minute, or for 5 minutes, or for as long as you like. The steady, predictable rhythm of the box has a profoundly regulating effect on the mind and body. It breaks the cycle of anxious, shallow breathing and imposes a pattern of calm and control. There is a powerful analogy for how these practices work. Imagine a wise, experienced sailor caught in a violent ocean storm. On a nearby boat, a novice sailor is panicking. The novice curses the wind, screams at the giant waves, and tries to row against the immense power of the sea, quickly exhausting himself and nearly capsizing. The wise sailor, however, knows that he cannot control the ocean. He knows it is foolish to fight the waves. So he ignores the terrifying scale of the storm and brings his full, unwavering attention to the one small part of the situation he can control, his sails. With calm, steady, and focused movements, he adjusts the sails to meet the wind. A powerful gust hits, and he adjusts them again. A giant wave crashes over the deck, and as soon as it passes, he calmly returns his focus to adjusting the sails. He is not fighting the storm, he is dancing with it. He is working with its energy, not against it. In this metaphor, we are the sailor. The storm is the chaos of the world. The waves are the overwhelming events that crash upon us. And our breath is our sails. To try and fight the chaos is futile and exhausting. The path of wisdom is to let go of the struggle with the storm and to bring our full, calm, and continuous attention to the one thing we can always regulate, the rhythm and quality of our own breath. By tending to our breath, we can skillfully and peacefully navigate any storm life sends our way. This simple, profound tool, is our most constant and reliable refuge. It requires no belief system. It costs nothing. You do not need any special equipment or a quiet room. Your breath is with you from the moment you are born until the moment you die. It is a faithful, lifelong companion. This makes it the most democratic, the most accessible, and the most intimate tool for finding peace that we will ever possess. It is our anchor in the storm, our sanctuary in the chaos, always waiting patiently for us to come home to it in any moment of need with a single conscious breath. Having found our anchor in the breath and the solid ground of the body, we have established an inner refuge, a place to return to when the storms of life begin to rage. We have learned to work with our own reactivity. But a wise sailor knows that navigating a storm is not just about managing the boat. It is also about understanding the quality of the water you are sailing in and choosing your course with intention. We now turn our awareness from our inner landscape to the constant stream of information and stimulation that flows into it from the outside world. We are all intimately familiar with the concept of a physical diet. We understand, on some level, that if we consistently consume food that is processed, unhealthy, and lacking in nourishment, our bodies will become sluggish, unwell, and prone to disease. The exact same principle applies to the mind. The information we consume, the news we read, the social media we scroll through, the entertainment we watch, the conversations we engage in is a form of mental food. And the health of our mind is a direct reflection of the quality of our mental diet. In our modern world, we are living in the midst of an all-you-can-eat buffet of mental junk food. Outrage is served hot and fresh, 24 hours a day. Fear is available in every flavor. Gossip, envy, and distraction are offered for free at every turn. In such an environment, if we are not conscious of what we are consuming, we will inevitably become mentally and spiritually unwell. The practice of mindful consumption is the art of becoming a conscious, discerning, and healthy eater in the midst of this chaotic information buffet. To grasp the urgency of this practice, we must understand a fundamental principle of the brain. It is constantly being shaped by our experiences. This is the science of neuroplasticity. The principle is often summarized with the phrase, "Neurons that fire together, wire together." This means that whatever we repeatedly focus our attention on, whatever mental and emotional states we repeatedly inhabit, we are physically strengthening the neural pathways for those states. If you spend hours each day consuming media that triggers feelings of anger, fear, and hopelessness, you are not just having a bad day, you are actively training your brain to be more anxious and more angry. You are paving a neurological superhighway for outrage, while the little country lane of peace and contentment becomes overgrown with weeds. We must also recognize that we are living within a system that is deliberately designed to exploit this feature of our brains. This is the attention economy. Countless multi-billion-dollar corporations, from news media outlets to social media platforms, are locked in a ferocious battle for our single most precious and finite resource, our attention. Their business models often depend on keeping us engaged for as long as possible, and they have discovered that nothing hooks our attention quite like a jolt of strong negative emotion. Outrage is more engaging than contentment. Fear is more shareable than peace. Conflict generates more clicks than harmony. In many ways, the chaos of our information environment is not an accident, it is a business model. But we are not helpless victims in this process. With every click, every share, every minute we spend watching a piece of content, we are casting a vote. We are telling the algorithms and telling our own brains, "More of this, please." The practice of mindful consumption begins with the profound realization that we have a choice. We can choose what we feed our minds. We can choose to vote for more chaos, or we can choose to vote for more clarity. A helpful way to visualize this choice is to think of your mind as a garden. This garden is a plot of fertile ground, capable of growing beautiful flowers or thorny weeds. The information and stimuli of the world are like seeds, carried on the wind, that are constantly blowing into your garden. In our chaotic world, many of these seeds will be weed seeds of anger, fear, comparison, and despair. A foolish or neglectful gardener might try to build a giant wall to stop the wind, a futile task. Or they might simply let all the seeds land and grow wherever they please, and then wonder why their garden is an overgrown, thorny mess. A wise gardener, however, understands that they cannot control the wind. They accept that weed seeds will inevitably arrive. Their work is not to control the external conditions, but to diligently and wisely tend to the soil of their own garden. When a weed seed lands, they can choose not to water it with their attention. They can gently pull it out when it is still small and weak. And most importantly, they can consciously choose to plant, water, and fertilize the seeds of the flowers they actually want to grow, the flowers of kindness, wisdom, joy, and peace. They dedicate their most precious resources, their time, and their attention to cultivating beauty. Mindful consumption is this art of wise gardening. It is the conscious and deliberate tending of the precious soil of your own mind. This practice of curating an information diet can be broken down into simple, actionable steps. The first step is to conduct an audit. For 1 week, become a gentle, non-judgmental scientist of your own consumption habits. Carry a small notebook or use an app on your phone. Throughout the day, simply notice what you are consuming and, more importantly, how it makes you feel. You might note, spent 20 minutes scrolling my social media feed, feeling slightly anxious and a little bit envious. Or watched the evening news for 30 minutes, feeling angry and helpless. Or listened to a podcast about art history, feeling inspired and calm. Do not judge these findings. Just gather the data. You are simply learning the ingredients in your current mental diet and their effect on your well-being. Once you have this data, you can begin the second step, making conscious choices. Based on your audit, you can start to mindfully curate your information stream. This might mean unfollowing social media accounts that consistently post content that leaves you feeling agitated or inadequate. It might mean actively seeking out and following accounts that share things you find genuinely beautiful, interesting, or uplifting: art, nature, poetry, wisdom teachings. You can apply this to your news consumption. Instead of getting your information from the chaotic, outrage-driven fire hose of a social media feed, you might choose 1 or 2 relatively neutral, reputable news sources and decide to read them intentionally rather than grazing on headlines all day. This leads to the third and perhaps most powerful practical step, creating boundaries with time. One of the most stressful aspects of our modern information flow is that it is constant. There is no off switch. We can counteract this by creating our own containers. This practice is sometimes called time boxing. You might decide, I will allow myself to check the news for 15 minutes in the morning after my meditation and for 15 minutes in the early evening. The rest of the day is a news-free zone. This simple act is profoundly liberating. It prevents the constant, low-level drip of cortisol that comes from being perpetually plugged into the world's crises. You are no longer reacting to the world's timeline. You are consciously choosing when and how you engage with it. It is natural that an objection might arise here. Isn't this just sticking my head in the sand? Isn't it an irresponsible and privileged act to tune out when the world is facing so many problems? This is a critical question, and it requires us to reframe the entire practice. Mindful consumption is not about cultivating ignorance. It is about cultivating effectiveness. An anxious, overwhelmed, constantly outraged, and burnt-out person is of no use to anyone. They cannot think clearly. They cannot act wisely. They cannot be a source of calm or stability for their families or their communities. Their energy is so consumed by their own reactivity that they have nothing left to offer the world. A person who is calm, grounded, and well-informed because they consume information with intentionis, far more capable of engaging with the world's problems in a deep, sustainable, and compassionate way. Think of a skilled surgeon. A surgeon must be an expert on disease and injury, but they do not spend their days endlessly scrolling through graphic photos of horrific accidents just to stay informed. They study what they need to know to be effective in their craft. They protect their own state of mind, their own well-being, so that when they enter the operating room, they can show up with a steady hand and a clear mind. To practice mindful consumption is to decide to become a surgeon for the world's problems, rather than just another helpless victim of them. Our attention is the most powerful and precious resource we have. It is the currency with which we build our lives. We must learn to invest it wisely. We must learn to be the conscious gatekeepers of our own minds. In a world that is determined to hijack our attention and sell it to the highest bidder, the simple, quiet act of choosing where you place your focus is the ultimate act of rebellion, freedom, and radical self-care. Having learned to curate the information we allow into our minds, we now turn to a more intimate practice, the curation of our own time and attention in the midst of our daily lives. So much of our modern suffering comes from a kind of destination addiction. We live in a state of perpetual waiting. We believe that our real life, the life where we will finally be happy and at peace, is waiting for us in the future. It is on the upcoming vacation. It is on the weekend. It is after this next big project is finished, after the kids are grown, after we retire. We treat the present moment, especially the ordinary, mundane moments, as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to be rushed through on the way to somewhere better. We wash the dishes while already thinking about the television show we will watch next. We drink our morning coffee while our mind is already racing with the anxieties of the workday ahead. We walk from one room to another, but we miss the journey entirely because we are lost in the labyrinth of our thoughts. The tragic result of this way of living is that we miss our life. For life is not lived in the handful of highlight moments. Life is composed almost entirely of the small, ordinary, in-between moments. They are the 99%. To constantly rush through the ordinary is to miss almost the entirety of our existence. The path to finding peace in a chaotic world is not about escaping these mundane moments, but about discovering how to inhabit them so fully that they reveal themselves to be sanctuaries in disguise. This modern affliction of constantly rushing toward the next thing can be called hurry sickness. It is a state of being where our body is in one place, but our mind is always somewhere else. This fundamental disconnect between mind and body is a deep source of anxiety and dukkha. We feel scattered, fragmented, and never truly settled because we are never fully where we are. The antidote to this sickness is the practice of transforming a simple daily task into a profound meditative ritual. It is the conscious choice to take one ordinary activity and perform it with extraordinary attention. Let us take, for example, the simple act of making a cup of tea. For most of us, this is a hurried, automatic process, but we can choose to make it a 5-minute retreat, a sanctuary of peace in our day. The practice begins with a clear intention. As you approach the kettle, you can say to yourself, "For the next few minutes, this is all I am going to do. I am going to make and drink a cup of tea. This is my whole world." You turn on the water, and instead of walking away to do something else, you listen. You listen to the sound of the kettle as it begins to hum, the sound slowly rising in pitch until it reaches a boil. You choose your favorite cup, and you feel its weight and texture in your hands. You place a tea bag or loose tea into the cup, noticing its color and its fragrance. You pour the hot water, and you watch the steam rise in a beautiful, impermanent dance. You watch as the clear water is slowly infused with color, the rich amber or green spreading like a cloud. You are not just waiting for the tea to be ready, you are participating with your full presence in the miracle of transformation. When the tea is ready, you carry the cup to a chair. You feel the warmth spreading through your hands. Before you take a sip, you take a moment to smell its aroma. Then, you take the first sip, and you don't just swallow it. You allow the flavor to spread across your tongue. You feel the warmth as it travels down into your body. You have done nothing but make a cup of tea, but by doing it with your full, undivided attention, you have stepped out of the chaotic stream of time and into the deep, peaceful river of the present moment. You have created a sanctuary. This same principle can be applied to any activity. You can brush your teeth with this level of attention. You can take a shower, feeling the sensation of the water on your skin. You can fold a single towel as if it were the most important task in the world. The object of the meditation does not matter. The quality of the attention is everything. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh gave the most famous teaching on this subject, using the example of washing the dishes. He was once asked by a student how to practice mindfulness in a busy life. He explained that if, while you are washing the dishes, you are thinking only about the delicious dessert that you will eat afterward, then you are not really washing the dishes. You are a ghost, haunting your own life, your mind lost in the future. Then, when the time comes to eat your dessert, you will likely be thinking about the next thing what you need to do tomorrow, or a conversation you need to have. And so, you will miss the dessert as well. You will not taste its sweetness or appreciate its texture because your mind will be somewhere else. He taught, with profound simplicity, when you are washing the dishes, you must wash the dishes. The purpose of washing the dishes is not merely to get clean dishes. The purpose of washing the dishes is to be fully alive during the time you are washing the dishes. It is to be fully present for your own life. If you are incapable of washing the dishes with mindful joy, you will be incapable of finding it anywhere else. If you can find peace and presence in this simple, mundane task, you are building a capacity for peace that you can carry with you into every other moment of your life. There is no such thing as unimportant time. All time is lifetime. When we embrace this practice, we begin to fundamentally transform our relationship with our own lives. We start to dissolve the illusion of wasted or boring time. So much of our day is filled with moments we label as unproductive. The commute to work, the time spent waiting in a line, the household chores that seem to never end. We see these moments as obstacles to be endured. But with mindfulness, we discover that there are no boring moments, only moments of inattention. When we bring our full, curious awareness to any experience, it becomes fascinating. The intricate, swirling patterns of soap on a dirty plate, the complex choreography of muscles and bones involved in taking a single step, the subtle changes in light and shadow during a slow commute are as worthy of our attention as any masterpiece in a museum. We learn to find beauty and wonder not just in the extraordinary, but in the heart of the ordinary itself. Furthermore, this practice turns these moments from being energy-draining chores into opportunities for profound mental and emotional renewal. Ordinarily, we rush through our housework, our minds still racing with the stresses of the day. We are physically present, but mentally absent, which is an exhausting state of fragmentation. But when we choose to fold the laundry with mindful attention, we are practicing a form of dynamic meditation. By focusing our awareness on a simple, repetitive, physical task, the feeling of the warm fabric, the sight of the clean, geometric fold sweep are giving the chattering, analytical, and worrying part of our brain a much-needed rest. These moments become islands of restorative calm in the midst of a busy day. They are opportunities to recharge our mental and emotional batteries. Instead of finishing our chores and feeling more depleted, we can finish them feeling more centered, more grounded, and more peaceful than when we began. You can begin to integrate this into your life today. Choose one single, simple activity that you perform every day. It could be making your bed in the morning. It could be eating your breakfast. It could be locking the door when you leave your home. And make a gentle vow to yourself that for this one activity, you will try to be 100% present. Turn off all distractions. Slow down your movements by 25%. And bring your full sensory awareness to the task. Feel the sheets as you smooth them. Taste each bite of your food as if for the first time. Feel the cool metal of the key in your hand and the satisfying click of the lock turning. Start with just one of these Zen moments a day. Do not see it as another thing you have to do, but as a gift of peace you are giving to yourself. You are discovering that the sanctuary you have been seeking is not in some distant, future paradise. It has been here all along, hidden in plain sight, in the beautiful, profound, and sacred reality of your own ordinary life. All that is required is that we show up for it. Having learned to find a sanctuary in the midst of our ordinary daily tasks, we now expand our search for peace beyond the walls of our own homes and into the great, living sanctuary that is the natural world. For many of us, our lives are lived almost entirely within an environment built by human hands. We live and work in boxes of concrete, glass, and steel. We walk on flat, hard surfaces of asphalt and pavement. We exist under the constant, unwavering glow of artificial light and the ceaseless hum of machinery and electronics. This environment, for all its technological convenience, is profoundly alien to the human nervous system, which evolved over millions of years in intimate relationship with the earth, the sky, the sun, and the moon. Deep within our biology, there is a memory of this connection, a quiet, persistent yearning for green spaces, for wildness, for a return to our original home. This innate attraction to life and lifelike processes is sometimes called biophilia, and in our increasingly chaotic, digital, and artificial world, answering this call is not a mere luxury or a pleasant form of recreation. It is an essential and powerful therapeutic practice, a direct antidote to the specific anxieties and pressures of modern life. One of the most profound, yet subtle, sources of our modern stress is our subservience to what can be called machine time. Our world operates on the time of the clock. It is a linear, fragmented, and unforgiving master. Our days are divided into seconds, minutes, and hours. Our lives are measured in deadlines, quarterly reports, and rigidly scheduled appointments. This relentless pressure to be productive, to be efficient, to be on time, creates a constant, low-level tension in our bodies and minds. It is a rhythm that is fundamentally foreign to our biological nature. The natural world, however, operates on an entirely different kind of time. It moves to the rhythm of the sun and the seasons. It is cyclical, patient, and deeply mysterious. In a forest, there is no hurry. A tree grows according to its own innate, unmeasurable schedule. The moon waxes and wanes without concern for deadlines. The seasons turn in a vast, slow, and graceful dance. When we consciously immerse ourselves in nature, we are stepping out of the tyranny of machine time and allowing our own agitated nervous systems to resynchronize with this deeper, slower, more ancient and healing rhythm. The feeling of restoration we experience after a walk in the woods is not just in our imagination. It is a genuine recalibration of our entire being, a return to the tempo at which we are meant to live. This intuitive understanding has now been powerfully validated by modern science. The Japanese have a practice called Shinrin-yoku, which translates as forest bathing. It is not about hiking or exercise. It is the simple art of being calm and quiet amongst the trees, observing nature with all of our senses. Scientific research into this practice has revealed remarkable benefits. Studies have shown that spending even a short amount of time in a forest environment can lead to a significant reduction in blood pressure, a lowering of the stress hormone cortisol, a decrease in anxiety and depression, and an improvement in concentration and memory. Researchers have also discovered that trees and plants emit airborne antimicrobial compounds called phytoncides. When we breathe in the forest air, we are breathing in these compounds, and studies have shown that this can lead to a measurable boost in our immune system, increasing the number and activity of our natural killer cells, which help fight off disease. This growing body of evidence confirms what wise people have always known. Nature is not just a beautiful backdrop, it is a powerful medicine for the human body and mind. We can all engage in this healing practice. You do not need to travel to a vast remote wilderness, a city park, a quiet botanical garden, a walk along a river, or even time spent with a single tree can be a profound experience. The key is not where you are, but how you are. The goal is to move from doing to being. First, set a clear intention. For the next 30 minutes, your only goal is to be present with the natural world, using all of your senses. Leave your phone behind, or at least put it on silent. Begin to walk at a slow, meandering, aimless pace. This is not about covering distance. Stop whenever you feel drawn to something. Now, begin to consciously engage your senses. Open your eyes and truly see. Notice the almost infinite variety of greens in the leaves around you. Observe the intricate, fractal patterns of a fern or the rough, weathered texture of a tree's bark. Watch the way the sunlight filters through the canopy, creating a dappled, shifting pattern on the forest floor. Look for the tiny details: an ant carrying a piece of leaf, a spider's web glistening with dew. Next, open your ears and listen. Listen not just to the obvious sounds, like the song of a bird or the chatter of a squirrel, but to the deeper symphony of the forest. Listen to the sound of the wind rustling the leaves high in the trees. Listen to the gentle creaking of branches swaying. Listen to the sound of your own footsteps on the earth. And listen, most profoundly, to the silence that holds all of these sounds. Now, consciously use your sense of smell. Take a deep breath. What do you smell? The rich, damp scent of the earth? The sharp, clean fragrance of pine needles? The delicate perfume of a hidden wildflower? And finally, engage your sense of touch. Gently touch the surface of a mossy stone, feeling its cool, soft texture. Run your fingers over the rough bark of a tree. Pick up a fallen leaf and feel its delicate, papery structure. Feel the temperature of the air on your exposed skin. By immersing yourself in this sensory feast, you pull your awareness out of the noisy, abstract world of your thoughts and anchor it firmly in the rich, vibrant reality of the present moment. You are not just looking at nature, you are allowing yourself to become a part of it once more. Beyond the immediate physiological and psychological benefits, nature serves as one of our most profound spiritual teachers. It offers a living, breathing demonstration of the deep truths we have been exploring. It is the ultimate teacher of impermanence, or anicca. Everywhere you look in nature, you see this law in action. You see the fallen tree slowly decaying and returning to the soil, providing nourishment for new life. You see the clouds in the sky constantly forming, shifting, and dissolving. You see the creek that is never the same from one moment to the next. By observing this constant, graceful flow of change, our own anxious clinging to permanence begins to soften. We see that change is not a threat. It is the fundamental, creative engine of the universe. Nature also teaches us about interconnection, or anatta. In a forest ecosystem, nothing exists in isolation. The towering trees depend on the microscopic fungi in the soil to access nutrients. The fungi depend on the trees for sugars. The insects pollinate the flowers. The birds spread the seeds. Everything is part of a vast, intricate, and interdependent web of life. To spend time in a forest is to receive a direct lesson in the truth of interbeing, a lesson that powerfully undermines the ego's illusion that we are separate, isolated selves. And finally, nature is a master teacher of resilience. We see a flower pushing its way up through a crack in a concrete sidewalk. We see a tree that was scarred by a lightning strike decades ago, yet has continued to grow, twisting itself towards the sun. Nature shows us, again and again, the incredible persistence of life, its ability to adapt, to endure, and to find a way to flourish even in the face of immense hardship. Imagine, for a moment, an ancient gnarled tree standing alone on a hillside. Its roots run deep into the earth, holding it fast. Its trunk is thick and weathered. Its bark, a roadmap of its long history. This tree has stood in this one spot for hundreds, perhaps thousands, of years. It has silently endured countless scorching summers, freezing winters, violent storms, and gentle springtimes. It has been a home for generations of birds and insects. It does not hurry, it does not complain, it does not resist the changing seasons. It simply stands, grounded, present, and utterly itself, reaching for the nourishing earth below and the life-giving sky above. When we feel overwhelmed by the frantic, fleeting, and noisy chaos of our own short lives, we can bring the image of this ancient tree into our minds. We can breathe with it, we can learn from it. We can begin to cultivate its silent strength, its profound patience, and its deep, grounded wisdom within our own hearts. To reconnect with the natural world is not a form of escapism. It is an essential act of remembering who we are. Nature is our original home, our first temple, and our wisest teacher. Returning to it is returning to ourselves. It is a healing balm, freely available to all of us, that calms our nervous system, clarifies our mind, and reminds us of the deep, slow, and resilient truths of existence. The peace we seek is waiting for us, just outside our door. As we learn to find sanctuary in the world around Yusin, the mindful rhythm of our daily tasks, and in the healing presence of nature, we must turn our attention to the quality of our most intimate environment, the relationship we have with ourselves. For we can be sitting in the most beautiful forest in the world, yet if our inner landscape is a battlefield of self-criticism and judgment, we will find no peace. In times of great external chaos and uncertainty, a strange and cruel mechanism often takes hold within us. When the world outside feels out of control, we try to regain a sense of agency by clamping down on the one thing we feel we should be able to control: ourselves. We are met with a constant barrage of first arrows from the world, and then, when we inevitably struggle, we shoot ourselves with the most painful second arrow of all, the arrow of self-judgment. An inner voice, a harsh internal critic, begins its relentless commentary. You should be handling this better. Why are you so anxious? Other people are coping just fine. You need to be stronger. Pull yourself together. We treat our own pain and vulnerability not with care, but with contempt. In overwhelming times, this inner critic becomes our most intimate tormentor. The wisdom of this path teaches us that this habit of self-flagellation is not a source of strength. It is the deepest source of our weakness. It is the single greatest obstacle to building true resilience. And the antidote to it is the practice of self-compassion. This is not a sentimental luxury. It is an essential, non-negotiable survival skill for finding peace in a chaotic world. It is vital that we first understand what self-compassion is and what it is not, for the term is frequently misunderstood, especially in a culture that often equates toughness with strength. Self-compassion is not self-pity. Self-pity is a state of passive and isolating victimhood. It is the story of poor me. When we are caught in self-pity, we become completely absorbed in our own problems and we feel that we are the only one in the world who is suffering. It is a contracting, disempowering state that disconnects us from others. Self-compassion, as we will see, is a state of connection, not isolation. Self-compassion is also not self-indulgence. It is not an excuse to shirk responsibility or to simply do whatever feels good in the moment, regardless of the long-term consequences. Treating yourself with compassion does not mean saying, "I'm feeling stressed, so I will just abandon all my commitments, eat a gallon of ice cream, and binge-watch television for 12 hours." Often, this kind of indulgence only leads to more suffering later in the form of guilt, poor health, and added stress. True self-compassion is something far more wise, brave, and powerful. At its core, self-compassion is the practice of treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding that we would spontaneously offer to a dear friend who was struggling. Imagine for a moment that your best friend comes to you, they're heartbreaking, feeling overwhelmed, anxious, and convinced they are a failure. What would be your response? Would you look at them with disdain and say, "Get over it, you're being weak"? Of course not. You would most likely soften your voice, open your arms, and say something like, "Oh, this is so hard. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Of course you feel this way. It's completely understandable. I'm here for you." Self-compassion is the radical act of learning to turn this same warm, supportive, and unconditionally kind response inward. It is the choice to become our own best friend, especially in moments when we feel we deserve it the least. It is not a source of weakness, but the very foundation of the courage we need to face life's difficulties. The pioneering researcher Dr. Kristin Neff has broken down the practice of self-compassion into 3 core components, which provide a wonderfully clear and accessible framework. The first pillar is mindfulness. This is the foundational skill we have been cultivating all along. We cannot offer ourselves compassion for our pain if we are not first aware that we are in pain. In our attempt to be strong, we often try to ignore or suppress our difficult feelings. Mindfulness is the opposite. It is the ability to turn toward our suffering, our anxiety, our sadness, our feelings of failure, and to hold that experience in a balanced and clear awareness. It avoids the 2 extremes. We don't suppress the feeling, but we also don't get lost in it, exaggerating its drama. We simply acknowledge the reality of our experience with a gentle, non-judgmental recognition. We say to ourselves, "This is a moment of suffering. This is really hard right now." This simple act of naming and acknowledging our pain is the first step toward healing it. The second pillar is common humanity. This is the profound and healing antidote to the shame and isolation that suffering so often creates. When we fail or feel intense pain, our inner critic tells us a story that we are the only one. We feel abnormal, flawed, and separate from everyone else who seems to be coping just fine. The truth of common humanity is the deep recognition that suffering, imperfection, and failure are not signs of our personal inadequacy. They are an inescapable part of the shared human experience. To be human is to be vulnerable. To be human is to make mistakes. To be human is to feel pain. This realization shifts our perspective from "why me" to "just like me." Just like me, millions of other people are feeling anxious right now. Just like me, everyone I know has felt like a failure at some point. Just like me, all beings wish to be happy and free from suffering. This insight is not just an intellectual idea, it is a profound comfort. It breaks the isolating spell of shame and reconnects us to the vast family of humanity. It is the very same realization Kisa Gotami had when she went from house to house and found that every single family had been touched by the pain of loss. Our pain is not what separates us, it is what connects us. The third pillar is self-kindness. Having acknowledged our pain with mindfulness and having connected it to the shared human experience, We now actively respond with warmth and care, rather than with coldness and judgment. This is the direct opposite of the inner critic. It is the conscious choice to be gentle and understanding with ourselves when we are suffering. It is the act of soothing and comforting our own being. This is where we learn to speak to ourselves as we would speak to that dear friend. We offer ourselves words of comfort, encouragement, and unconditional acceptance. This pillar is about actively generating a feeling of warmth and care and directing it inward. These three components, mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness, work together to create a stable and powerful, compassionate response to our own dukkha. We can revisit our parable of the crying baby to understand this process intuitively. Your feeling of overwhelm is your crying baby. Your anxiety is your crying baby. Your deep sense of failure is your crying baby. What is the wisest and most loving response? Do we shout at the baby and tell it to be quiet? This is the inner critic. Do we lock the baby in another room and put on headphones so we don't have to hear it? This is suppression and distraction. The path of self-compassion is the path of the wise parent. We hear the cry, we pause what we are doing, and we turn toward the source of the suffering. We gently pick up our own pain, our own anxiety, our own sorrow. We hold it close to our heart. We embrace it with tenderness. And we whisper to it, I am here. I see you are suffering. I will not abandon you. I will take care of you. This simple, loving gesture is all that is needed. You can put this into practice in your own life with a simple, embodied exercise known as the self-compassion break. You can do this anytime, anywhere, in 30 seconds or less. The moment you notice you are in a state of struggle, pause. This is the first step, mindfulness. Say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering, this is stressful, this hurts. Then, for the second step, common humanity, you can gently place a hand or both hands over your heart. Feel the warmth and the gentle pressure. This physical gesture is deeply soothing to our mammalian nervous system. It releases oxytocin and signals safety. As you feel your own touch, remind yourself, suffering is a part of life. Other people feel this way. I am not alone. Finally, for the third step, self-kindness, offer yourself some words of comfort. You might say, may I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion that I need. May I accept myself just as I am. Find the words that feel authentic to you. This simple, three-step practice can completely interrupt the downward spiral of the second arrow. It stops the cycle of self-judgment and replaces it with a moment of grace. It is an act of profound courage and self-care, a declaration that you will no longer be an enemy to yourself. In a chaotic world that inflicts so many unavoidable first arrows, self-compassion is the radical commitment to stop generating our own suffering. It is the foundation of resilience, the source of the courage we need to face the world, and the beginning of a true and lasting peace that starts with being at peace with ourselves. Having learned to meet our own personal suffering with the profound kindness of self-compassion, we have built a foundation of inner resilience. We have become a safe harbor for ourselves. This practice is essential, for without it, we are too fragile to face the world. But a peace that is built only for oneself, a peace that requires us to shut the doors and windows to the cries of the world, is ultimately a fragile and incomplete peace. It is a sanctuary that can easily become a prison. The spiritual path, in its fullest expression, calls us to take the strength we have cultivated for ourselves and turn it outward. It asks us to learn how to keep our hearts open, even in the face of the immense suffering of our chaotic world. This is the practice of karuna, or compassion, directed not just at our own pain, but at the pain of all beings. It is the courageous answer to the question that haunts so many of us in these turbulent times. How can I possibly stay sane, hopeful, and open-hearted when there is so much suffering everywhere I look. The default emotional response to the large-scale suffering we witness in the news and on our social media feeds is often one of outrage. Outrage feels powerful. It feels righteous. It provides a momentary, satisfying jolt of moral clarity and energy. We see an injustice, and we are flooded with anger at the perpetrators and the systems that allow it to happen. In a world that so often makes us feel helpless, outrage can feel like a form of action, a way of taking a stand. But we must look very closely at the nature of outrage and its ultimate effect on our own minds and on the world. Outrage is a hot emotion. It is a close cousin to anger and hatred. And like all forms of anger, it is a fire that consumes. It burns us out, leaving us exhausted, cynical, and more hopeless than before. More insidiously, outrage reinforces the very us versus them mentality that lies at the root of so much of the world's conflict. It simplifies the world into a stark drama of heroes and villains. It makes us see those with whom we disagree not as complex, suffering human beings, but as monstrous, one-dimensional caricatures. It deepens the trenches of polarization and makes genuine dialogue and reconciliation impossible. While it may feel good for a moment, outrage is ultimately a poison that sickens our own hearts and adds more toxicity to the world. Compassion offers a different path. It is a cool or warm emotion, not a hot one. It does not seek to punish an enemy. It seeks to alleviate suffering wherever it is found. Its foundational insight is a radical one. Even those who cause immense harm are themselves caught in a profound state of suffering. The Buddha taught that all unskillful actions of greed, hatred, and violence arise from a mind that is confused, deluded, and in deep pain. A person whose heart is filled with genuine peace and wisdom is incapable of harming another. Therefore, when we look at an oppressor, an aggressor, or anyone causing harm, the compassionate response is not just to feel for their victims, but to also recognize the deep spiritual sickness that must be driving the aggressor. This is an incredibly difficult practice. It requires us to look past the monstrous action to see the suffering human being behind it. This does not, in any way, mean condoning their actions. It does not mean we don't work to stop the harm. It simply means we refuse to let their hatred plant the seed of hatred in our own hearts. It is the only way to truly break the endless, tragic cycle of violence and retaliation. This begins with the practice of learning to see the human being behind the label. Our minds, in an effort to simplify a complex world, love to categorize people. We slap labels on them: the liberal, the conservative, the immigrant, the billionaire, the protester, the police officer. Once we have applied the label, we stop seeing the person. We see only a representative of a group we either agree with or despise. We project all of our ideas, biases, and fears onto them. The practice of compassion is the conscious, intentional effort to see past these labels. When you encounter someone, either online or in person, whose views you find abhorrent, the practice is to pause, to take a breath, and to silently remind yourself, this person, just like me, was once a vulnerable child. This person, just like me, knows the pain of disappointment and loss. This person, just like me, has people that they love. This person, just like me, is afraid of something. This person, just like me, wishes to be happy. Again, this is not an excuse for their views or actions. It is a technique for protecting our own hearts from the poison of dehumanization. It is the refusal to participate in the collective trance that allows us to see our fellow human beings as enemies. It is a small, quiet, but revolutionary act of peace. We can formalize this practice through compassion meditation, directing our well wishes to a world in pain. First, as always, we begin by grounding ourselves. We find a stable posture, connect with our breath, and generate a feeling of self-compassion. We cannot be a source of strength for others if we ourselves are feeling depleted and unmoored. Then, instead of trying to feel compassion for the entire world at once, which can be too vast and abstract, we bring to mind a specific situation of suffering that we have learned about recently. It might be a community affected by a natural disaster, a region experiencing the horrors of war, or a group of people facing systemic injustice. We bring this situation to mind, and we gently allow ourselves to touch the reality of the pain involved. We don't need to dwell on graphic details, but we allow our hearts to soften and open to the truth of this dukkha. Having connected with the situation, we can then begin to silently radiate the phrases of compassion. We can direct them to the victims, to those who are most directly in harm's way, to all of you who are frightened, who are hurting, who have lost your homes or your loved ones. May you be safe. May you be free from your suffering. May you be held in a great compassion. May you find peace. We breathe with this intention, truly wishing for their suffering to end. Then comes the more advanced and challenging stage of the practice. We turn our attention to the perpetrators of the harm, the soldiers, the oppressors, the people acting out of greed or hatred, and we recognize, with the eye of wisdom, that they too are suffering deeply, trapped in the hell of their own delusion. And so, we extend our compassionate wish to them as well. To all of you who are causing this harm, who are caught in the grip of anger, fear, and delusion, may you too be free from your suffering. May the seeds of hatred in your hearts be transformed. May you awaken to the wisdom of compassion and find a true and lasting peace. This is perhaps the most difficult practice on the entire path, but it is the one that holds the key to true peace. For as long as we withhold our compassion from anyone, our own hearts cannot be truly free. In the rich iconography of the Buddhist world, the ultimate embodiment of this practice is the figure of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. In many traditions, Avalokiteshvara is known as Kwan the Am, which means, she who hears the cries of the world. This is a profound name. It suggests that the first act of compassion is not doing, but listening. It is the willingness to bear witness, to turn towards suffering rather than away from it. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes. The 1,000 eyes symbolize the wisdom to perceive suffering in all its forms, in every corner of the universe. No cry for help goes unheard. The 1,000 arms symbolize the capacity to respond to that suffering with endless skillful means, offering whatever is needed in that momenta: word of comfort, a physical protection, a challenging teaching. To practice compassion meditation is to train ourselves in the way of Avalokiteshvara. We are training our inner ear to hear the cries of the world without being deafened by them. We are training our inner heart to respond not with the reactive fire of outrage, but with the steady, healing warmth of a boundless and courageous love. Often, compassion is mistaken for a soft, sentimental, or even weak emotion. The truth is precisely the opposite. Compassion, in a world such as ours, is the ultimate expression of courage. It is the courage to keep your heart open in hell. It is the strength to look upon the most heartbreaking realities of the human condition, without shutting down, without turning away, without retreating into the easy cynicism that masquerades as intelligence. It is the resilience to absorb the pain of the world without being broken by it, and to transform that pain into a motivation for wise and loving action. To cultivate compassion is to decide that you will not add to the world's hatred, no matter how justified it may feel. It is to decide that your own heart will be a sanctuary of peace, a source of warmth in a world that so often feels cold. It is the only force strong enough to truly meet the chaos of our times, not with more chaos, but with a love that has the power to heal. Having opened our hearts to the difficult truth of the world's suffering through the practice of compassion, we arrive at a critical juncture. A heart that is only open to pain, without a countervailing practice of joy, runs the risk of being crushed by the sheer weight of sorrow. When we expose ourselves to the endless stream of tragic news and injustice that defines our chaotic world, it is easy to fall into a state of despair, a cynical and hopeless belief that the world is nothing but a place of darkness, conflict, and misery. This state, sometimes called compassion fatigue, is a form of burnout that can lead us to shut down our hearts completely, retreating into a protective shell of apathy. To sustain a compassionate and engaged heart, we must learn to perform a vital balancing act. We must train ourselves not only to see the suffering in the world, but also to actively notice, celebrate, and connect with the good. This is the practice of consciously cultivating joy. In a world saturated with negativity, the deliberate choice to seek out and feel joy is not a naive, frivolous, or self-indulgent act. It is a radical, courageous, and essential act of spiritual resistance that builds the resilience we need to continue our path. To understand why this practice is so necessary, we must first understand a fundamental feature of our own minds. Our brains are hardwired with a negativity bias. This is a product of our evolutionary history. For our ancient ancestors surviving on the savannah, it was far more important to pay attention to potential threats than to potential pleasures. Missing a beautiful flower had no survival consequence, but missing the sound of a predator in the grass could mean immediate death. As a result, our brains evolved to be like Velcro for negative experiences and like Teflon for positive ones. We scan the world for threats. We remember our failures more vividly than our successes, and we are far more affected by a single critical comment than by a dozen compliments. In the ancient world, this bias kept us alive. In the modern world, this same bias is being systematically exploited to keep us anxious, agitated, and addicted to our screens. The business model of much of the news media and social media platforms relies on this quirk of our brains. They know that stories of conflict, fear, and outrage are far more likely to grab and hold our attention than stories of harmony, peace, and contentment. And so, they feed us a constant diet of what our primitive brain craves: threats. The result is that we are presented with a deeply distorted and overwhelmingly negative picture of reality. It is not that goodness, kindness, and beauty have disappeared from the world. It is simply that they are not considered newsworthy. This creates a vicious cycle. We consume negative content, which makes us feel that the world is a hopeless place. This feeling of hopelessness then primes us to look for more evidence to confirm our belief, which the media happily provides. We become trapped in a feedback loop of despair. The practice of cultivating joy is the conscious act of breaking this spell. There is a simple and powerful parable for this practice. Imagine you find yourself in a vast and pitch-black room. The darkness feels absolute, cold, and frightening. You could spend all of your time and energy fighting the darkness. You could curse it. You could wave your hands wildly trying to push it away. You could scream into the void. But all of this would be utterly futile and exhausting. The darkness would remain, and you would only feel more helpless. A wise person, however, would not waste their energy fighting the darkness. They would understand that darkness is not a positive force in itself. It is simply the absence of light. Therefore, the only way to overcome the darkness is to introduce light. So, this person would do something much simpler and infinitely more powerful. They would strike a single match and light a single, small candle. The candle, in its smallness, does not destroy all the darkness in the room, but in the space immediately around it, it creates a pool of unwavering light and gentle warmth. The darkness has no power to extinguish the flame. The only remedy for darkness is light. In this metaphor, the darkness is the cynicism, despair, and negativity that can so easily overwhelm us. Trying to fight it directly, by arguing with it or resisting it, often just makes us more entangled. The acts of cultivating gratitude and joy are the lighting of the candle. Each small moment of appreciation, each heartfelt celebration of another's happiness, is a small flame that we intentionally introduce into the darkness of our own mind, and by extension, into the world. The most direct way to begin lighting these candles is through the formal practice of gratitude. Gratitude is more than just saying thank you. It is the active and deliberate training of our attention. It is the practice of learning to see the goodness and abundance that are already present in our lives, but which are so often rendered invisible by our focus on what is wrong or what is lacking. You can begin a simple gratitude practice today. At the end of your day, take a few quiet moments with a notebook or just with your own thoughts. Consciously call to mind 3 specific things from your day for which you feel genuinely grateful. The key here is specificity. It is good to be grateful for your family, but it is far more powerful to be grateful for the specific way my partner smiled at me this morning, or the sound of my child's laughter during dinner. It could be as simple as, I am grateful for the taste of my first cup of coffee, or I am grateful for the feeling of the warm sun on my face during my walk, or I am grateful for the simple fact that my body is healthy enough to carry me through the day. This practice, when done consistently, works like a form of neuroplasticity. It begins to counterbalance the brain's innate negativity bias. It starts to carve out new neural pathways, training your mind to automatically notice what is good, what is working, and what is beautiful. Alongside gratitude, we can practice the deliberate seeking of the good. This means consciously curating our information diet to include stories of hope, kindness, courage, and cooperation. It means recognizing that the picture of the world presented by mainstream news is incomplete. This is not about ignoring the world's problems, but about making sure we are also seeing the vast and underreported reality of human goodness. There are now many websites, podcasts, and social media accounts dedicated solely to sharing good news. Make it a practice to spend just 5 minutes a day consuming this kind of content. This simple act can dramatically shift your perspective on the state of humanity and serve as a powerful antidote to the feeling of hopelessness. The third, and perhaps most expansive of these joy-cultivating practices, is mudita, or sympathetic joy. As we've seen, it is the practice of rejoicing in the happiness and success of others. From the perspective of counteracting despair, mudita is an incredibly powerful tool. When we are feeling low, isolated, and overwhelmed by the world's sorrows, our own small life can feel like the only data point we have, and it can feel bleak. The happiness of others, seen through the lens of envy, can even add to our pain. But when we can intentionally flip that switch to mudita, the good fortune of others becomes a source of nourishment and hope for us. When we hear that a friend has received good news, when we see a family celebrating a milestone, when we read about a community coming together to create something beautiful, we can choose to connect with their joy. This act reminds us that even if we are personally struggling, happiness, success, love, and connection still exist in the world. It breaks the spell of our own narrow negative storyline. It connects us to the larger human family and reminds us that the totality of human experience is vast and contains both immense suffering and immense, radiant joy. To practice mudita is to open countless new windows in our own heart, allowing the light from the happiness of others to stream in and illuminate our own being. It is the joyful realization that we do not have to create all of our own light. We can learn to delight in the light of others. To cultivate joy in a chaotic world is not an act of denial or spiritual bypassing. It is a strategic and necessary act of defiance against the forces of despair. It is the conscious choice to build our own inner reserves of resilience, strength, and hope, so that we have the fortitude to continue to face the world's difficulties without being consumed by them. It is the wisdom of the gardener who knows that to have a healthy garden, you must not only pull the weeds, but also diligently water the flowers. By practicing gratitude for what we have, seeking out the evidence of goodness in the world, and celebrating the joy of others, we are tending to our own hearts. We are lighting our own small candle and discovering that its gentle flame not only illuminates our own path, but adds to the collective light of the entire world. Having built an inner toolkit of grounding, mindfulness, and heartfelt compassion, we are now better equipped to navigate the stormy seas of our chaotic world. But to truly become a wise sailor, we must understand the fundamental nature of the ocean itself. We must look directly at the single, universal truth that underlies all chaos, all uncertainty, and all of life's turbulence. This is the profound and transformative teaching of impermanence. In the Pali language, this is known as anicca. At first glance, the idea that everything is changing and nothing lasts can sound depressing or nihilistic. It can seem to pull the rug out from under everything we hold dear. And yet, the Buddha taught that a deep, penetrating, and experiential understanding of impermanence is not a source of sadness, but the very key to unlocking a profound and unshakable peace. It is the master key that frees us from our self-inflicted suffering and allows us to finally stop fighting with reality and instead learn to dance with it. The vast majority of our anxiety, frustration, and stress comes from a single, fundamental misunderstanding. We are beings who crave security, predictability, and permanence. Yet we are living in a universe whose most basic, non-negotiable law is constant, relentless change. Our suffering is born in the gap between our desire for things to be solid and the reality that they are not. This is the war we wage against reality every single day. We can see this war being fought on two fronts. The first front is our clinging to the pleasant. When things in our life are good, we experience a moment of happiness. We might be in good health, our job might feel secure, a relationship might be flourishing, or the world might seem, for a moment, to be relatively stable. But almost immediately, the second arrow of suffering arises. A subtle, anxious thought appears. I hope this lasts. What if I lose this? What if things change? We try to grasp the pleasant experience, to freeze the moment in time, to build a permanent home on a patch of ground that is, by its nature, always shifting. This clinging is an exhausting and impossible task. It prevents us from fully enjoying the good moments when they are here, because we are already mourning their inevitable departure. The second front in this war is our aversion to the unpleasant. When things change for the worse, when we get sick, when we lose a job, when a loved one leaves us, when a political or social crisis erupts, we suffer immensely. The first arrow of the painful event strikes, and we immediately fire a volley of second arrows of resistance. We are consumed by thoughts of, this shouldn't be happening, this is wrong, I want things to go back to the way they were. This mental resistance is a declaration of war on what is. We are standing on the shore, screaming at the tide to stop coming in. This is a battle we can never win, and the struggle itself creates far more pain than the initial event. The chaos of our modern world can be seen as the law of impermanence, operating in a highly accelerated and visible way. The rapid pace of technological disruption, the volatility of the global economy, the shifting climate, the fast-moving political landscape, these are all making the fundamental truth of instability impossible to ignore. Our suffering is not caused by the change itself, but by our continued, stubborn insistence that things should be stable, predictable, and permanent in a universe that has never once offered such a guarantee. The path of wisdom does not ask us to simply believe in the idea of impermanence as a philosophical concept. It invites us to experience its truth directly for ourselves, in the laboratory of our own experience. This is how we move from an intellectual understanding to a deep, cellular, knowing that changes everything. Our mindfulness practice is the perfect tool for this investigation. We can begin with our own breath. As we sit in meditation, we observe that the breath is not a static thing. It is a process. Each in-breath has a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. It arises, it persists for a few moments, and then it dissolves. It is followed by a pause, and then a new out-breath arises, persists, and dissolves. The entire process is a continuous, rhythmic unfolding of birth, life, and death. We cannot hold on to a single breath. To try to do so would be to suffocate. The breath is a flowing river, and by watching it, we are learning the nature of flow itself. We can then turn our awareness to the body. As we practice the body scan, we discover that the body is not a solid, fixed object, but a vibrant, shimmering field of sensation that is in a constant state of flux. An itch suddenly appears on our arm. We watch it, and it fades away. A feeling of warmth spreads through our chest and then dissipates. A point of sharp tension in our shoulder softens and morphs into a dull ache before disappearing entirely. No sensation is permanent. The body we have today is different from the one we had yesterday and different from the one we will have tomorrow. It is a flowing process of change, not a solid entity. We can also observe our own mind. Thoughts, emotions, and moods are perhaps the most obviously impermanent phenomena we can experience. In the space of a single minute, we can feel a flash of happiness, a pang of sadness, a moment of boredom, a flicker of anger, a surge of desire. The thoughts themselves are like clouds passing through the vast open sky of our awareness. They appear from nowhere. They take a shape for a moment, and then they dissolve back into nothingness. When we see this directly, we begin to take our thoughts less personally and less seriously. Why get so attached to a single angry thought when we know, with certainty, that it will soon be replaced by something else? By training ourselves to see impermanence in these intimate, personal ways, we become more attuned to seeing it in the world around us. We begin to notice the way the light changes throughout the day, the way the clouds are in constant motion, the life cycle of a plant on our windowsill. We are training our minds to become comfortable with the truth of change, to see it not as a threat, but as the very texture of life itself. There is a classic Zen parable that perfectly illustrates the wisdom of yielding to this truth. A great, mighty oak tree stood in a field, immensely proud of its strength, its size, and its unbending rigidity. It looked down with contempt upon a slender reed growing by the riverbank. "You are pathetic," mocked the oak. "You bow and tremble at every tiny puff of wind." The reed did not answer. That night, a violent storm descended upon the land. The wind howled with a ferocious, irresistible force. The mighty oak tree stood firm, using all of its incredible strength to resist the gale. It would not bend. The slender reed, however, did what it always did. It yielded. It bent low, allowing the full force of the storm to pass over it, its tip almost touching the ground. The next morning, the sun came out, and the world was calm. The slender reed, which had offered no resistance, stood up again, glistening and unharmed in the morning light. The mighty oak tree, however, lay shattered on the ground. Its massive trunk, which had so proudly resisted the force of reality, had been snapped in two. The metaphor is clear. The oak tree is the ego mind, clinging to its fixed ideas, its sense of permanence, and its belief that it can withstand the forces of change through sheer, rigid strength. The reed is the wise mind. It understands the truth of impermanence. It does not waste its energy fighting reality. It yields, it adapts, it bends. And in this very flexibility, it finds its unbreakable resilience and its ability to survive any storm. This shift in perspective can be described as moving from fighting the waves to learning how to surf them. Imagine standing in the ocean surf. If you plant your feet firmly and try to resist the power of the incoming waves, what happens? you are relentlessly battered. You are knocked over, you get a mouthful of sand and salt water, and you stand up just in time to be knocked over by the next wave. It is a brutal, exhausting, and joyless experience. This is the life of clinging and resistance. But a surfer has a different relationship with the waves. A surfer does not try to stop the ocean. They accept its immense power as a given. Instead of resisting the wave's energy, they learn to work with it. They develop balance, skill, timing, and flexibility. They learn to ride the very force that would otherwise crush them. To do so is not a struggle, but an exhilarating and joyful dance. To deeply accept the truth of impermanence is to stop trying to be a rock in the surf and to begin learning how to be a surfer. We learn to ride the waves of pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, with more grace, more skill, and even a sense of exhilaration. This is not a teaching of pessimistic resignation. It is the most radically optimistic and empowering stance we can take in the face of a chaotic world. It is the realization that our suffering does not come from change itself, but from our fruitless war against change. To accept impermanence is to declare a peace treaty with reality. When we stop fighting, we liberate an immense amount of energy that was previously consumed by worry, by clinging, and by resistance. We become lighter, more adaptable, and more present. We can finally open ourselves with a sense of curiosity and wonder to the great, unpredictable, and ever-changing dance of life, because we are no longer terrified of where the next step might lead. By befriending the truth of change, we find the only true and lasting peace. There is a peace that is not dependent on circumstances ever staying the same. Having learned to dance with the great truth of impermanence, we arrive at its direct and often challenging consequence. If everything is constantly changing, it means that we can never know for certain what will happen next. We are faced with the profound and often terrifying reality of uncertainty. This feeling of not knowing is perhaps the most fundamental source of anxiety in the human condition. It is the feeling of standing at the edge of a great cliff in a thick, impenetrable fog. We know we must take a step, but we cannot see the path ahead. Is there solid ground or a perilous drop? This state of uncertainty is intolerable to the human mind. Our brain is, at its core, a prediction and meaning-making machine. It evolved to constantly analyze the past in order to predict and control the future, thereby maximizing our chances of survival. A blank space, an unknown variable, feels like a profound threat. We believe, on a deep, instinctual level, that if we just knew what was coming, we could prepare for it, we could control it, we could keep ourselves safe. And so, our mind launches a desperate and ultimately futile campaign to eliminate the discomfort of the unknown. The mind's primary strategy for dealing with uncertainty is a deeply flawed one. Since it cannot tolerate the empty, open space of not knowing, it frantically tries to fill that space with something solid, a story. It begins to write a script for the future. And because of the brain's innate negativity, bias its tendency to pay far more attention to potential threats than to potential rewards. The stories it writes are almost always worst-case scenarios. The mind doesn't fill the void of uncertainty with tales of joyful surprises or wonderful opportunities. It fills it with its deepest fears. Consider how this plays out in our lives. You are waiting for the results of an important medical test. The reality of the situation is simple. You do not yet know the outcome, but the mind cannot rest in this simple reality. It immediately begins writing a detailed and vivid story of a terrible diagnosis. It imagines the difficult conversations, the painful treatments, the catastrophic consequences. You begin to live, in your own body and mind, the suffering of a future that has not happened and may never happen. Or perhaps there is economic uncertainty in the air. The reality is that the future of the economy is complex and unpredictable. But the mind writes a story of certain job loss, of financial ruin, of losing your home. You experience the anxiety and fear of these events as if they were happening right now. This is the great irony of our struggle with uncertainty. In our desperate attempt to escape the discomfort of not knowing, we create for ourselves the certain and acute suffering of dread. We torture ourselves with 1,000 imagined tragedies, all to avoid the simple, clean, and honest reality of the present moment, which is, I do not know what will happen. The wisdom of this path offers a radical and liberating alternative. Instead of frantically trying to fill the void, we can learn to rest in it. We can learn to become comfortable with the feeling of not knowing. The first step in this practice is the simple act of naming. When you feel your mind begin to spiral into anxious projections about the future, the practice is to pause, take a breath, and apply a gentle mental label. You can simply note, this is worrying, or this is storytelling, or this is the mind trying to predict the future. This simple act of naming is incredibly powerful. It creates a space between your awareness and the thought process. You are no longer lost in the story. You are the one who is observing the mind as it tries to write a story. You are recognizing the mind's strategy, and in that recognition, you are no longer its slave. From here, we can begin to cultivate a quality that the poet John Keats called negative capability. He described it as the capacity to be in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. This is a spiritual superpower. It is the ability to allow the blank page of the future to remain blank without feeling a compulsive need to scribble our fears all over it. It is the courage to stay with the open question rather than rushing to a premature and often fearful answer. How do we practice this? It is an active state of allowing, of relaxing around the discomfort. When the urge to know, to plan, to worry arises in the mind, we notice it. We feel the corresponding tension in our body, perhaps a tightness in the chest or a knot in the stomach. And instead of acting on that urge, we consciously choose to soften around it. We breathe into the physical sensation of uncertainty. We say to ourselves, internally, it is okay to not have the answer right now. I can rest in this open space. I can trust my ability to meet whatever comes when it comes. This practice requires a deep letting go. It is a surrender of our illusion of control and an opening to a sense of trust in life and in ourselves. There is a timeless Taoist parable that perfectly illustrates the foolishness of our rush to judge events and our pretense of knowing the future. An old farmer lived in a small village. One day, his only horse, which he needed for plowing, ran away. His neighbors all came to console him. "Oh, what terrible luck," they said. The farmer simply replied, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" A week later, the horse returned, and it brought with it a herd of magnificent wild horses. The neighbors gathered again, this time to congratulate him. "What wonderful luck," they exclaimed. The farmer again replied, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" The next day, the farmer's son was trying to tame one of the wild horses when he was thrown off and his leg was badly broken. The neighbors came once more. "How awful," they said. "Your son is injured. This is truly terrible luck." The farmer just shrugged and said, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" A few weeks after that, the emperor's army came to the village, forcibly conscripting all the able-bodied young men to fight in a brutal war from which few would return. They saw the farmer's son with his broken leg, and they passed him by. The neighbors, awestruck, came to the farmer. "You were right," they said. "Your son was spared. It was wonderful luck after all." The old farmer, looking out at his fields, simply said, "Good luck? Bad luck? Who knows?" This story beautifully reveals the limits of our perspective. We see only a tiny fragment of an infinitely complex web of causes and effects, and yet we rush to label every event as definitively good or bad. The universe's causal chains are far too vast and mysterious for our small minds to comprehend. The wisest and most honest stance we can take, therefore, is one of profound humility. It is the ability to rest in the wisdom of the farmer, the wisdom of who knows. In our culture, to say, "I don't know," is often seen as a sign of weakness, failure, or ignorance. We feel a tremendous pressure to have a confident opinion, a solid 5-year plan, a definitive forecast. We pretend to know things we cannot possibly know, both to ourselves and to others. The path of wisdom invites us to reframe "I don't know," not as a statement of weakness, but as a statement of profound courage, freedom, and intelligence. It is, after all, the most honest and accurate description of our relationship with the future. To admit "I don't know" is to lay down the impossibly heavy burden of pretending to be omniscient. It is to let go of the exhausting project of trying to control the uncontrollable. Paradoxically, this surrender opens us up to a greater wisdom. When we are not locked into our own fearful, narrow story about what is going to happen, we are more present, more flexible, and more creative in meeting the present moment as it actually unfolds. We leave room for grace, for surprise, for serendipity, for outcomes far better than we could have ever planned. The anxious need for certainty closes the mind. The courageous acceptance of uncertainty opens it. This is the wisdom of the beginner's mind, a mind that is always open to possibility, because it has not yet decided it knows the answer. This is the peace that is found not in having all the answers, but in becoming comfortable living with the questions. It is the quiet strength that comes from surrendering to the great, mysterious, and unknowable flow of life itself. Having learned to dance with the great truth of impermanence and to rest in the wisdom of uncertainty, we have made peace with the fundamental nature of our chaotic world. We have stopped fighting a war we can never win, but this acceptance can lead to a new and subtle challenge. As we open our hearts with compassion to the vast suffering of the world, and as we accept our inability to control grand outcomes, we can be ambushed by a profound sense of helplessness. We see the sheer scale of the world's problems: climate change, systemic poverty, political division, war, and we feel utterly small and insignificant. Our personal actions can feel like a single drop of rain in a vast and thirsty desert. This feeling of overwhelm is a gateway to paralysis. We become convinced that because we cannot do everything, we should do nothing. We retreat into cynicism, apathy, or the narrow confines of our own private lives, leaving the world to its fate. This, however, is not the conclusion of the wise and compassionate heart. The path of wisdom does not lead to paralysis. It leads to agency. It teaches us how to transform the feeling of helplessness, not by developing the power to change the entire world, but by discovering the immense power we have to affect the small part of the world that is within our reach. To find this power, we must first understand the landscape of our engagement with the world. We can think of our lives as existing within two concentric circles. The outer, larger circle is our sphere of concern. This sphere contains all the things we care and worry about. It includes the state of the global economy, the conflicts on other continents, the political direction of our country, the health of the planet. This sphere is vast, complex, and for the most part, lies far outside our direct personal control. When we spend the majority of our mental and emotional energy living in our sphere of concern, obsessively following the news, worrying about global trends, getting into endless arguments about national politics, we are investing our precious life energy in things we cannot change. This is a guaranteed recipe for anxiety, frustration, and a chronic sense of helplessness. It is like trying to change the direction of a hurricane by shouting at it. The inner, smaller circle is our sphere of influence. This sphere contains everything that we can directly affect through our own choices and actions. It includes our own state of mind, the words we choose to speak, the way we treat our family and colleagues, the quality of attention we bring to our work, the way we consume and dispose of resources, and our engagement within our local community. While this sphere may seem small in comparison to the vastness of our concerns, it is the only place where we have true agency and power. The path of wise action is the conscious and deliberate practice of shifting our primary focus from our sphere of concern to our sphere of influence. It is the decision to stop pouring our energy into the uncontrollable and to instead invest it fully in the controllable. We may not be able to single-handedly reverse climate change, but we can create a garden in our backyard, reduce our own consumption, and support local environmental initiatives. We may not be able to bring peace to the Middle East, but we can bring a moment of peace to our own household by practicing deep listening with a family member. We may not be able to end economic inequality on a national scale, but we can volunteer for an hour a week at a local food bank. This shift is profoundly empowering. It immediately moves us from a state of passive, anxious worry into a state of active, purposeful engagement. And a strange and beautiful thing happens when we focus on our sphere of influence. It begins to grow. A person who is a source of peace and wisdom in their own family and workplace naturally has a greater positive influence on the world than a person who is simply angry about global events. One of the most powerful practices for cultivating this sense of agency is the ancient virtue of dana, a Pali word that means generosity, giving, or offering. In times of fear, chaos, and uncertainty, our primitive survival instinct is to contract. We become fearful. We hoard our resources, our time, and our energy. We retreat into a fortress of I, me, and mine, trying to protect our small stash from a threatening world. This state of contraction, of stinginess, is a state of suffering. It is rooted in a belief in scarcity. Generosity is the direct and radical antidote to this fear. To give is an act of opening, of letting go, of affirming abundance in the face of perceived lack. It is a declaration of trust in the flow of life. The practice of dana can take many forms. There is, of course, the giving of material resources. This is the act of donating money or goods to a cause you believe in, or simply helping someone in financial need. But the teachings speak of even more profound forms of generosity. There is the giving of our time and energy. This can mean volunteering for a community project, helping an elderly neighbor with their groceries, or offering our professional skills to an organization that needs them. There is the giving of safety or fearlessness. This is the gift we offer to the world simply by living an ethical life, by practicing sila. When we commit to being a harmless presence, we give the gift of safety to every being we encounter. And perhaps most importantly, there is the giving of the Dharma. This does not mean preaching or trying to convert anyone. It means sharing the peace and wisdom we have cultivated in ourselves simply by embodying it. The greatest gift we can offer to an anxious world is our own calm presence. The act of giving, in any of these forms, is a powerful medicine for despair. It breaks the isolating spell of the ego and its self-centered fears, and reconnects us with our community and our own sense of purpose. And its primary beneficiary is always the giver. The open-handed heart can never be a clenched fist of fear. There is a beloved modern parable, often attributed to the writer Lauren Isley, that perfectly captures the spirit of wise action. An old wise writer was walking along the beach at dawn after a great storm. He saw that the tide had washed thousands upon thousands of starfish up onto the sand. They were scattered as far as the eye could see, and in the heat of the morning sun, they would all soon perish. In the distance, the writer saw a young man moving with a rhythmic grace. The young man was bending down, picking something up, and gently throwing it far out into the sea. As the writer got closer, he called out, "Good morning. May I ask what you are doing?" The young man replied, "I am throwing these starfish back into the ocean. The tide is going out, and if I do not, they will die." The writer, a kind but pragmatic man, looked at the endless stretch of beach, littered with countless starfish. "But son," he said, "don't you realize there are miles and miles of beach and starfish along every mile? You can't possibly make a difference." The young man listened politely, nodded, and then bent down once more, picked up another starfish, and threw it back into the healing water. He turned to the writer, smiled, and said, "It made a difference to that one. This beautiful story contains the very essence of wise action. We are the young man. The beach is the world, filled with an overwhelming amount of suffering. We cannot save all the starfish. We cannot solve all the world's problems. And if we measure our actions by the standard of solving everything, we will be paralyzed by the sheer impossibility of the task. But the wisdom of the path teaches us to change our metric of success. It is not about grand, statistical victories. It is about alleviating suffering, one being, one moment, one starfish at a time. It is about making a difference to that one. This understanding frees us to act with integrity, without being attached to the results. We live in a deeply mysterious and interconnected universe. We can never truly know the full consequences of our actions. A single small act of kindness, a gentle word, spoken to a person in distress, a small donation to a worthy cause, a moment of our full, undivided attention given to a child can create unseen ripples that spread out in ways we can never predict or measure. The kind word we offer to a stressed checkout clerk might allow them to go home and be more patient with their family. The community garden we help to plant might nourish people for years to come. We do not act because we are certain of a particular outcome. We act because the action itself is in alignment with our deepest values of compassion and wisdom. We trust that a wholesome cause will create a wholesome effect, even if we are not there to witness it. This is the peace that comes from acting from a place of integrity, not from a place of egoic ambition. The antidote to the paralysis of helplessness, then, is not to find a grand solution, but to embrace a humble path. It is the wisdom to turn our gaze away from the overwhelming and uncontrollable, and to bring our full, loving, and dedicated attention to the small, controllable, and deeply meaningful actions that are right in front of us. It is the realization that in a world of immense chaos, the most powerful, sane, and peaceful thing we can do is to simply, patiently, and compassionately throw our one starfish back into the sea. Having committed to wise action within our small sphere of influence, we must now turn our attention to the most frequent, powerful, and often most perilous action we take: the act of speech. Our words are the tools with which we build the bridges of connection or dig the trenches of conflict. In our current historical moment, the landscape of communication has, for many, become a battlefield. Social media feeds, comment sections, and even family dinner tables have transformed into arenas for ideological warfare. Conversations about politics, social issues, or any topic of substance often feel less like a mutual search for understanding and more like a grim and exhausting battle of wills. We feel an immense pressure to take a side, to defend our position with ferocious certainty, and to vanquish the other side with our superior logic and moral righteousness. This state of constant, low-grade warfare is a profound source of the chaos we feel both internally and externally. It leaves us feeling angry, alienated, and hopeless. The ancient practice of samavaka, or right speech, offers a powerful and deeply countercultural path to peace. It is not merely a set of rules for being polite. It is a profound spiritual discipline for disarming conflict, healing division, and transforming our communication from a weapon of war into an instrument of peace. To apply this practice, we must first deconstruct the very language of polarization. We must understand the mechanics of how our communication creates conflict. The first and most powerful mechanism is the creation of an us versus them mentality. Our brains are wired with a deep, tribal instinct. When we feel threatened or uncertain, we retreat into the safety of our chosen group and view outsiders with suspicion and hostility. Polarized language powerfully exploits this instinct. It encourages us to stop seeing complex individuals and to instead see simple, one-dimensional representatives of the other side. We no longer see a person, we see a liberal, a conservative, a snowflake, a deplorable. These labels are a form of verbal violence. They dehumanize the other person, making it easier for us to feel contempt, ridicule, and aggression towards them. The second pillar of polarization is the trap of absolute certainty. In a polarized mindset, we become convinced that our side has a complete monopoly on truth, logic, and virtue, while the other side is unequivocally ignorant, irrational, or morally corrupt. This feeling of righteousness is intoxicating to the ego, but it is poison to the mind. It slams the door on curiosity, on humility, and on the possibility of learning anything new. It makes genuine dialogue impossible. Finally, polarized communication is almost always driven by the goal of winning. We are not listening to understand. We are listening for a flaw in the other person's argument, a weak point we can attack. We are not speaking to connect. We are speaking to score points, to deliver a clever takedown, to prove our own rightness to a real or imagined audience. This is a battle of egos, and even if we win, the result is always more separation and more suffering. Right speech is a practice designed to consciously dismantle all three of these pillars of conflict. The most potent and healing tool we have to counteract this is the radical act of deep listening. In our culture, we have largely forgotten how to listen. In most conversations, especially contentious ones, we are engaged in what the author Stephen Covey called listening with the intent to reply. While the other person is speaking, our mind is furiously at work. We are formulating our counter-argument. We are rehearsing our rebuttal. We are waiting for them to pause for breath so we can jump in and make our own point. This is not listening. This is reloading. Deep listening, a practice rooted in compassion, is entirely different. Its sole intention is not to reply, but to understand. It is the generous and courageous offering of our quiet, focused, and non-judgmental presence. It is the commitment to try and see the world through the other person's eyes, to understand their experience from the inside out, even and especially if we disagree with them. The practice of deep listening involves listening not just for the what, the surface-level facts and opinions being expressed, but for the why. It is the art of listening for the unmet needs, the core values, and the hidden fears that are driving the other person's position. Behind a rigid and angry political stance, we might hear a deep and understandable fear for the safety of their family. Behind a passionate argument for a particular social policy, we might hear a powerful, deeply held value of fairness and justice. When we listen for this deeper level, we connect with the shared humanity beneath the conflicting opinions. A practical technique to aid this is called reflective listening. After the person has spoken, you can gently say, "So, if I am understanding you correctly, it sounds like you are feeling really worried about the future of your community. Is that right?" This simple act of reflecting back what you heard, without judgment or argument, is transformative. It makes the other person feel seen and heard, which immediately lowers their defenses and de-escalates the conflict. It is a profound gift of validation. As we learn to listen deeply, we must also change the way we speak. The simplest and most powerful shift we can make is to move from using you statements to using I statements. You statements are inherently aggressive and accusatory. When we say, "You are wrong," or "You don't know what you're talking about," or "You always twist things," we are launching a verbal attack. The natural human response to an attack is to become defensive, to shut down, or to counterattack. the conversation immediately becomes a battle. I statements, on the other hand, are expressions of our own subjective experience, which can never be debated. No one can argue with how you feel. Instead of saying, "Your comment is offensive," which is an attack, we can say, "When I read that comment, I felt hurt." Instead of saying, "That's a ridiculous argument," we can say, "From my perspective, I see it differently." This simple shift in language transforms the entire dynamic of the conversation. It moves the interaction from a fight over who is objectively right to a mutual sharing of personal experiences. It builds bridges of understanding rather than walls of opposition. It is the direct practice of right speech, speaking truthfully about our own inner reality. Of course, there will be times, especially in the anonymous world of online forums, when we are met with pure aggression. Someone will try to hand us a gift of their own anger, hatred, and contempt. In these moments, we can remember the wisdom of the Buddha. When the man hurled insults at him, the Buddha did not engage in a debate. He did not defend his own character. He did not insult the man back. He simply, with profound equanimity, refused to accept the gift. He understood that internalizing the man's anger would only poison his own mind. This is a crucial lesson for our digital lives. When a troll leaves a hateful comment, we can see it for what it is, an offering of suffering from a person who is suffering, and we can choose, with quiet wisdom, to decline the gift. We do not need to reply. We do not need to argue. We do not need to defend ourselves. We can simply let the gift of poison remain with its original owner. This is an act of supreme self-respect and a powerful way to stop the cycle of online toxicity. This leads to the final, crucial wisdom of right speech, knowing when to gracefully disengage. A true dialogue requires at least some measure of mutual goodwill and a shared desire to understand. If it becomes clear that the other person has no interest in listening, no curiosity, and no intention other than to attack, insult, or win, then continuing the conversation is no longer a skillful or compassionate act. To continue to engage is simply to provide more fuel for their fire and to cause more agitation in our own mind. In such cases, the wisest and kindest action for everyone involved is to peacefully withdraw. This is not a sign of defeat, it is a sign of wisdom. It can be done with a simple, calm, and non-aggressive statement, such as, "I appreciate you sharing your perspective, but I can see we are not going to find common ground here. I wish you well." And then you walk away. You protect your own peace. You refuse to participate in a fruitless battle. In a world that is being torn apart by the weaponization of words, the practice of right speech is a powerful form of peacemaking. Each time we choose deep listening over angry rebuttal, an I statement over a you statement, or noble silence over a reactive comment, we are taking a stand for sanity. We are refusing to add to the chaos. We are choosing to become an oasis of peace in the midst of the battlefield of words. Our journey through the landscape of the heart has shown us how to cultivate the boundless warmth of loving kindness, the courageous tenderness of compassion, and the selfless delight of sympathetic joy. These are the radiant qualities that connect us to the world with love and empathy. Yet, as we stand in this chaotic world with a newly opened heart, we face a profound challenge. How do we hold the world's immense suffering without being shattered by it? How do we rejoice in another's success without being swept away by excitement? How do we love all beings without our hearts being broken by their actions or their fates? The heart, in all its radiant power, requires a final, crowning quality to bring it into perfect balance. It needs a container vast enough and strong enough to hold all of life's joys and sorrows without being tipped over. This is the fourth and final of the divine abodes, the sublime and stabilizing grace of upekkha, or equanimity. If compassion is the heart's trembling in the face of pain, equanimity is the deep, silent ground that allows the heart to tremble without breaking. It is the ultimate form of psychological resilience, the key to being fully engaged with our chaotic world while remaining inwardly, unshakably at peace. Of all the qualities we cultivate on this path, equanimity is the most easily misunderstood and, therefore, the most vital to clarify. To a mind conditioned by a culture of passionate highs and dramatic lows, the word equanimity can sound cold, sterile, and lifeless. It can conjure an image of a stoic, unfeeling person who has suppressed their emotions, a detached observer who simply doesn't care about the world. This is a complete and dangerous misreading. That state of apathetic withdrawal is not equanimity, it is indifference. Indifference is born of fear. It is a closing down of the heart to protect itself from pain. Equanimity is born of courage. It is the heart's capacity to remain wide open, no matter what it encounters. It is not about feeling less. It is about feeling everything with a greater wisdom and balance. Imagine the vast, deep ocean. On its surface, the weather of the world plays out in all its drama. There are days when the sun shines, creating joyful, sparkling waves. There are days when great storms rage, creating furious, crashing waves of anger and grief. The surface is constantly changing, dynamic, and alive with feeling. But deep below, in the immense, silent depths of the ocean, there is a profound stillness. The depths are not affected by the turmoil on the surface. They do not cling to the sunny days or resist the stormy ones. The deep ocean simply holds the surface weather in its vast, peaceful, and accepting embrace. To cultivate equanimity is to learn to identify with the silent, unwavering depths of our own consciousness, rather than with the constantly changing waves of our fleeting thoughts and emotions. It is the discovery of a peace so profound that it can hold both ecstatic joy and heartbreaking sorrow with the same steady, loving presence. It is not the absence of feeling, it is the presence of a peace that is deeper than all feeling. This profound balance is cultivated as a direct response to the 8 great forces that constantly blow upon our lives, seeking to throw us off center. In the Buddhist teachings, these are known as the 8 worldly winds. They come in 4 pairs of opposites, and they govern the emotional weather of our everyday existence. The first pair is pleasure and pain. We are constantly being touched by experiences that are either pleasant or painful, and our minds are conditioned to grasp at the pleasure and push away the pain. The second pair is gain and loss. This refers to our material fortunes, our possessions, our status. We feel elated when we gain them and devastated when we lose them. The third pair is praise and blame. Our fragile egos are inflated by the praise and approval of others and crushed by their criticism and blame. And the fourth pair is fame and disrepute. We crave a good reputation, to be known and admired, and we are terrified of being shamed, ignored, or publicly disgraced. In our chaotic modern world, these winds blow with hurricane force. Social media can deliver fame and praise on a global scale overnight, and it can deliver shame and disrepute with the same terrifying speed and intensity. Our inner stability is under constant siege. The practice of equanimity is the cultivation of a mind that is no longer at the mercy of these winds. The classic simile for this state is that of a great, solid rock mountain. Imagine this mountain, its base deeply rooted in the core of the earth, its peak reaching into the sky. The sweet, warm winds of praise, pleasure, gain, and fame blow upon it from the south. The mountain feels the warmth, but it is not moved. It does not lean into the wind, trying to hold on to it. It does not become proud or arrogant. It simply allows the wind to pass. Then, the bitter, cold winds of blame, pain, loss, and disrepute howl from the north with piercing force. The mountain feels the cold, but it is not shaken. It does not tremble in fear. It does not waste its energy resisting the storm. It simply stands, solid, silent, and grounded in its own immense nature. The mountain's peace does not depend on the weather being pleasant. Its peace is inherent to its own being. To cultivate equanimity is to become this mountain. It is to find a place of such deep grounding and stability within ourselves that the shifting winds of life's fortunes no longer have the power to uproot us. This mountain-like stability is not achieved through grim determination or by building thicker emotional walls. It arises as the natural and effortless fruit of deep wisdom, panna. It is supported by two great pillars of insight. The first pillar is the profound experiential understanding of impermanence, anicca. When we have seen for ourselves, over and over again in our meditation practice, that all things are in a state of constant flux, our relationship with the eight worldly winds is transformed. We see praise arise, and we know it will pass. We see blame arise, and we know that it too will pass. We see a moment of great pleasure, and we can enjoy it fully without the anxious need to cling to it, because we know its nature is to fade. We experience a moment of great pain, and we can endure it with more courage, because we know that it too is a passing cloud. The deep, visceral seeing of impermanence loosens the tight fist of our attachment and aversion. It allows us to hold all of life's experiences with a lighter, more open hand. The second pillar of wisdom is a mature understanding of karma, the law of intentional action. This is the clear seeing that all beings are the owners of their own actions and the heirs to the results of those actions. We are fully responsible for our own choices, our own speech, and our own intentions. We are not, however, responsible for the choices, speech, and intentions of others. This understanding is the key to balancing our open heart with a wise mind. It allows us to offer boundless compassion to someone who is suffering, while simultaneously understanding with equanimity that we cannot take their suffering away. Their healing is ultimately in their own hands. This protects us from the burnout that comes from taking on the impossible burden of trying to fix everyone. It allows us to act with great love and to offer all the help we can, while also letting go of our attachment to the outcome. We do our part with a full heart, and we release the results to the great, complex web of universal causality. This is the union of love and wisdom. In our daily lives, we practice equanimity by meeting the worldly winds with mindfulness. When someone offers you praise, the practice is to simply notice it. To note in your mind, praise is being heard, and to watch the ego's desire to puff up with pride without getting carried away by it. When someone offers you blame or criticism, the practice is to note, blame is being heard, and to feel the sting, to feel the body's reaction of contraction or heat, but to do so with a spacious awareness that does not immediately launch into defensiveness. We learn to let both pleasant and unpleasant experiences wash over us, like the winds washing over the mountain, without clinging and without resisting. It is the ability to read a terrifying news headline, to feel the appropriate and compassionate response of sadness for the suffering involved, but to do so from a place of inner balance that allows us to then ask, what, if anything, is the wisest and most helpful action I can take right now? It is the ability to engage in a difficult conversation, to speak our truth with kindness, while being completely at peace with the fact that we may not change the other person's mind. Equanimity is the ultimate harmonizer of all our other practices. It is the deep, quiet, and radiant peace of a heart that is so wide open it can hold the entire chaotic world within it. It is the final freedom that comes from being fully in the world, yet no longer of the world. It is the discovery of an inner home so stable that no storm can ever shake it. Having found the unshakable ground of equanimity, we discover a quality of profound stillness at our core, a mountain-like presence that is not moved by the howling winds of the world. This inner stability stands in stark and direct contrast to the defining characteristic of our chaotic modern age. its relentless, breathless, and ever-accelerating speed. We live in a world that worships at the altar of immediacy. We have instant coffee, instant news, on-demand movies, and next-day delivery. Our technology has rewired our brains to expect and demand instant gratification for every desire. This has created a collective cultural affliction, a kind of hurry sickness, that has made us profoundly impatient. We have lost the capacity for waiting. This impatience is not a trivial flaw. It is a deep source of our daily anxiety and stress. It makes us irritable when caught in traffic, frustrated with a slow computer, and intolerant of other people's natural pace. It pushes us to make hasty, reactive decisions, both in our personal lives and in our society. In such a world, the conscious cultivation of patience is not a dull or passive virtue. It is a radical and powerful act of wisdom. It is a deliberate choice to align ourselves with a deeper, more organic rhythm in a world that is addicted to the empty calories of speed. It is the art of finding peace, not by making the world move faster, but by learning to slow our own minds down. To understand the power of patience, we must first diagnose the disease of impatience from a spiritual perspective. Impatience is not just a personality quirk, it is a form of aversion. It is a manifestation of vibhava tanha, the craving for non-existence, which we have explored before. When we are impatient, we are engaged in a violent rejection of the present moment. We are declaring war on reality. We are standing in a line at the store, and our mind is screaming, "I refuse to accept this moment of waiting. I demand the future moment of being at the front of the line, right now." This inner battle against what is incredibly stressful. It floods our body with cortisol and adrenaline. It creates a feeling of being trapped, of being a victim of our circumstances. But it is crucial to see that our suffering does not come from the line itself. The line is just a neutral reality. Our suffering comes entirely from our resistance to the line. The impatience is the suffering. The chaotic and uncertain nature of our world dramatically amplifies this tendency. When things feel unstable, it triggers a primal sense of urgency within us. We feel we must solve the problem now, find the answer now, fix the situation now. This panicked haste is the enemy of wisdom. It leads to reactive emails, to poor financial decisions, to saying things in a conflict that we later regret. Patience, in this context, is the essential and courageous act of creating a space between the feeling of urgency and the impulse to act. It is the wisdom that understands that most complex problems are not solved by speed, but by clarity, and clarity requires time. It is vital to distinguish between two kinds of waiting: passive waiting and active, wise waiting. Passive waiting is the state we are all familiar with. It is a state of frustrated, helpless impatience. When we are stuck in a traffic jam, passively waiting, our minds are in turmoil. We are fuming, checking our watch, gripping the steering wheel, and feeling like a victim. We are mentally at our destination, while our body is trapped in the car. This state of inner division is stressful and depleting. The time feels agonizingly wasted. Active, wise waiting is the very essence of patience. It is the conscious choice to transform a moment of waiting into an opportunity for practice. When we find ourselves in that same traffic jam, we can begin by acknowledging and accepting the reality of the situation. Okay, I am in traffic. I cannot change this right now. This simple acceptance stops the war with reality. Then, instead of letting the mind spin in frustration, we can choose to actively inhabit the present moment. We can use this found time as a retreat. We can practice mindful breathing, feeling the rise and fall of the abdomen. We can do a mini body scan, noticing the tension in our shoulders and consciously inviting it to relax. We can notice the color of the sky or the details of the car in front of us. We can even choose to send metta, loving kindness, to all the other frustrated drivers around us. wishing for them to be at peace. In this way, we transform a moment of powerless frustration into a moment of peaceful practice. Patience is not about passively doing nothing. It is the active and intelligent art of being fully present and at ease while waiting for conditions to naturally change. There is a simple but profound parable that illustrates the folly of impatience and the wisdom of trusting in natural processes. A farmer who had just planted his rice seedlings was a man of very little patience. He wanted his harvest now. Every morning, he would go out to his field and anxiously inspect the tiny green sprouts, convinced they were not growing fast enough. One day, believing he had come up with a brilliant and efficient solution, he decided to take matters into his own hands. He waded into his paddy field and spent the entire day gently pulling each tiny sprout up by a few millimeters in order to help it grow taller. That evening, he went to bed, exhausted but deeply satisfied with his cleverness and hard work. The next morning, he rushed out to his field to admire the results of his efforts, only to find that every single one of the seedlings, their delicate roots, having been torn from the nourishing soil, had withered and died. The lesson is simple but deep. There are organic processes in life that have their own innate rhythm and timing, and they cannot be rushed. Our own spiritual growth is like this. The healing of a deep emotional wound is like this. The resolution of a complex family conflict or a global crisis is like this. Trying to force a premature outcome out of sheer impatience almost always damages the process and leads to a worse result. Patience is the wisdom to plant the seeds of wholesome action, to provide the right conditions of care and attention, and then to step back and trust in the natural, mysterious, and unhurried unfolding of life. This great virtue of patience can be seen as having two wings, which must be developed together for us to fly. The first wing is patience with others. When we feel impatient with another persona, slow-moving elderly person in front of us, a colleague who is taking a long time to explain something, a child who is struggling to tie their shoes of frustration, comes from a deeply self-centered perspective. We are thinking, my time is more important. My pace is the right pace. You are an obstacle to my goal. The direct antidote to this form of impatience is compassion or karuna. The practice is to pause, and instead of focusing on our own frustration, we can open our awareness to the reality of the other person. Perhaps that elderly person is in physical pain, and every step is an effort. Perhaps that colleague feels deeply unheard and has a powerful need to explain themselves thoroughly. Perhaps that child is not trying to annoy us, but is deeply absorbed in the complex and challenging task of learning a new motor skill. When we can see the world from their perspective, when we can feel their reality, our impatience naturally melts away and is replaced by a warm and gentle understanding. The second wing, which is often far more difficult to develop, is patience with ourselves. We are relentlessly impatient with our own journey. We are impatient with our own minds when they refuse to be quiet in meditation. We are impatient with our own hearts when they do not heal from grief as quickly as we think they should. We are impatient with our own habits, berating ourselves for falling back into old patterns. We are impatient for enlightenment, for peace, for the final destination. The antidote here is self-compassion. We must learn to offer ourselves the same gentle understanding we would offer to a friend on the same journey. We must become the wise gardener of our own hearts, understanding that growth is not a linear, predictable process. There are seasons of rapid growth, and there are seasons of dormancy. There are setbacks. There are unexpected storms. To berate ourselves for not being there yet is as foolish as the farmer pulling on his sprouts. We must learn to be patient with the slow, messy, beautiful, and non-linear process of our own becoming. Each time we fall, we must learn to pick ourselves up not with self-criticism, but with the gentle, patient, and unwavering kindness of a loving parent. In a world that is spinning faster and faster, a world that demands more, better, and now, the cultivation of patience is not a passive resignation. It is an active and powerful form of wisdom. It is the courage to slow down when everything and everyone around us is telling us to speed up. It is the confidence to trust in deeper, slower, and more organic rhythms than those of the machine. By learning to be patient with the world, with others, and most importantly, with ourselves, we give ourselves the priceless gifts of clarity, kindness, and a profound inner peace that is no longer held hostage by the demand that reality conform to our own hurried timetable. We learn to rest in the flow of time, and in that resting, we find our freedom. Having learned the wisdom of patience, we have begun to change our relationship with time, finding a quiet strength in the willingness to wait. This frees us from the frantic urgency that chaos so often imposes. But now we must address an even more fundamental source of our disquiet. We must look at the pervasive and deeply conditioned habit of postponing our own peace and happiness. Most of us live our lives in a state of perpetual, if only. We tell ourselves a constant story that our contentment is waiting for us in a hypothetical future, contingent upon some external condition being met. If only I had a better job, then I would be content. If only I could find the right partner, then I would feel whole. If only the political situation would stabilize, then I could finally relax. In a chaotic world, this tendency becomes even more pronounced. The present moment can feel so flawed, so stressful, and so far from our ideal that we seek refuge in the fantasy of a perfect future where all problems have been solved. We are living in a self-imposed exile from the present, always believing our real life is somewhere else, at some other time. This habit of destination addiction is a guarantee of suffering, because the perfect future never arrives. The path of wisdom offers a radical alternative. It teaches us to cultivate the profound and joyful quality of contentment. This is the art of discovering that the peace and happiness we have been seeking in the future is, in fact, already available to us, hidden in plain sight, in the simple, ordinary fabric of the present moment. It is absolutely essential to distinguish contentment from its passive and unhelpful cousin, complacency. In a culture that idolizes ambition and constant self-improvement, the idea of contentment can sound like giving up. We might mistake it for a lazy resignation or apathetic acceptance of a mediocre life. This is not at all what contentment means on the spiritual path. Complacency is a state of stagnation. It is the refusal to grow, to learn, or to make an effort to improve oneself or the world. Contentment, on the other hand, is an active and vibrant appreciation for the good that is already present. It is a joyful recognition of the abundance that we so often overlook in our relentless pursuit of what is missing. A truly contented person can still have goals. They can work hard to develop a new skill, to improve their health, to be of service to their community, or to create a work of art. The crucial difference lies in the inner motivation. A person driven by discontent strives from a place of perceived lack. Their inner monologue is, "I am not good enough. My life is not enough. I must achieve this next thing in order to be whole." Their striving is a frantic, anxious scramble to fill an inner void. A contented person strives from a place of fullness. Their inner state is, "I am already whole. My life, right now, is already rich with blessings. And from this place of fullness, I can joyfully engage in the process of growing and creating." One is a desperate struggle, the other is a joyful dance. Contentment provides the stable, peaceful, and nourishing foundation from which all wise effort can arise. The key to cultivating this profound sense of contentment lies in the practice of mindfulness, specifically the mindfulness of simple pleasures. Our minds are conditioned to seek out big, dramatic, and novel sources of happiness, the exotic vacation, the major promotion, the new romance. In our search for these firework moments, we completely overlook the quiet, gentle candlelight of the countless small joys that are available to us in every moment of every day. The practice of contentment is the art of training our attention to notice and savor these micro-delights. It is a practice you can begin right now. Let's explore it through our senses. First, the sense of sight. Allow your eyes to rest on something simple in your immediate environment. Perhaps it is the way the morning light is creating a beautiful, geometric pattern on the wall. Perhaps it is the vibrant, deep red of an apple sitting on your table. Perhaps it is the intricate, miraculous design of a single leaf on a houseplant. Instead of glancing at it and dismissing it as unimportant, pause for just a moment. Truly see it. Notice the subtle variations in its color, its texture, its form. Appreciate this simple, silent gift of beauty. Now, the sense of sound. Our world is filled with noise, but it is also filled with sound. Can you listen to the sound of rain falling outside your window, not as an inconvenience, but as a soothing, natural music? Can you truly hear the sound of a loved one's laughter and appreciate it as the precious gift it is? Can you even notice the profound pleasure of the silence that descends when a noisy appliance, like a refrigerator or an air conditioner, finally turns off? Consider the sense of smell. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee or tea in the morning is a profound and simple pleasure. The clean, fresh scent of laundry just brought in from outside. The fragrance of the air after a summer rainstorm. These scents have the power to instantly change our state of mind, yet we so often rush past them without even noticing. What about the sense of taste? So often, we eat our meals while distracted by our phones or the television, barely tasting a single bite. The practice of contentment is to eat, even if it is just the first 3 bites of your meal, with your full attention. Take a single grape, for example. Before you eat it, look at it, see its color and shape. Then, place it in your mouth and, before chewing, just notice the sensation. Then, as you bite down, pay full attention to the burst of sweetness. Savor it. A single grape, eaten with this level of mindfulness, can be a more satisfying and joyful experience than a whole banquet eaten in a state of distraction. Finally, there is the sense of touch, the feeling of a warm, soft blanket on a cool evening, the simple pleasure of a cool breeze on your skin on a hot day, the comforting weight and warmth of a cat or dog resting peacefully in your lap. Our bodies are in constant contact with the world, receiving sensory information. The practice is to simply tune into it. It is not enough just to notice these simple pleasures. The second part of the practice is to consciously savor them. When you notice a small moment of pleasure, stay with it for an extra breath or two. Let the pleasant feeling really land. Let your body and mind absorb the nourishment of the experience. This simple act of savoring actively counteracts the brain's negativity bias and its tendency to be Teflon for positive experiences. We are consciously training ourselves to register and absorb the good. The most direct and systematic path to generating this feeling of contentment is the practice of gratitude. As we have seen, gratitude is the active training of our attention to focus on what we have rather than on what we lack. It fundamentally changes our inner accounting. Instead of constantly calculating our deficits, we begin to take stock of our immense and often overlooked riches. When we take a moment to feel genuine gratitude for the simple fact that we have food to eat today, that we have a roof over our head that protects us from the elements, that we have a friend we can call when we are feeling low, the frantic story of not enough begins to dissolve. We look at our life not through the lens of what is missing, but through the lens of what is present. And what we find, almost universally, is that in this very moment, we have enough. We are enough. This realization is the very heart of contentment. We can revisit the story of the powerful king and the simple hermit to see this truth in action. The king, who possessed all the material wealth and power in the world, was fundamentally discontent. His entire life was a project of acquisition. His happiness was always dependent on the next conquest, the next palace, the next piece of gold. His inner state was one of perpetual striving, a constant thirst for more. He was defined by what he did not yet have. The hermit, who possessed nothing, was the embodiment of contentment. His happiness was not dependent on any external object or condition. It arose from his complete and joyful appreciation for what was already present, the simple, free, and abundant warmth of the sun. He needed nothing more because he had realized the profound truth that what he already had was enough. This story reveals that true wealth is not a measure of our possessions, but a measure of our desires. The richest person in the world is not the one who has the most, but the one who wants the least. To cultivate contentment is a revolutionary act of defiance in a world that is built on and profits from our perpetual dissatisfaction. It is the wisdom to stop postponing our happiness until some imaginary, perfect future finally arrives, and to instead have the courage to discover the quiet, simple, and profound joy that is woven into the very fabric of this ordinary, imperfect, and beautiful present moment. It is the peace that comes, not from finally getting everything we want, but from learning to deeply, truly, and gratefully want what we already have. Having cultivated the gentle arts of patience and contentment, we begin to build a solid foundation of peace within ourselves. We learn to appreciate the simple goodness of our own lives, just as they are. But this fragile, newfound contentment is under constant assault from one of the most pervasive and poisonous habits of the human mind, the habit of comparison. There is an old and wise saying that comparison is the thief of joy, and this has never been more true than it is today. We can be feeling perfectly happy with our own lives, our own accomplishments, our own bodies, but in the single moment it takes to look at someone else's seemingly better life, a shadow of dissatisfaction can fall, stealing our peace away. We may have just enjoyed a simple, lovely vacation, but the moment we see photos of a friend's more lavish and exotic trip, our own experience feels suddenly diminished. We may be proud of a small success at work until we hear of a colleague's major promotion, and our pride turns to the bitter taste of envy. This habit of constantly measuring our life against the lives of others is a guaranteed path to suffering. It is a game that is rigged from the start, a game we can never win, and yet it is a game our culture, and especially our digital technology, encourages us to play every single day. The path to a stable and lasting peace requires us to learn the liberating art of non-comparison. While the tendency to compare is as old as humanity itself, it has been amplified into a global epidemic by the architecture of social media. Our social media feeds are not windows into the reality of other people's lives. They are meticulously curated, art-directed, and filtered highlight reels. They are stages upon which people present the very best and most enviable version of themselves. People post their victories, not their struggles. They post their picture-perfect wedding photos, not the argument they had that morning. They post the triumphant photo from the marathon finish line, not the months of grueling, painful training, or the self-doubt they felt the night before the race. The fundamental psychological error we make, over and over again, is that we compare our own raw, unedited, behind-the-scenes footage with all its messiness, its boredom, its self-doubt, and its private sorrow to everyone else's polished and perfected movie trailer. This is an unfair and deeply distorted comparison. It is like comparing a real, living human body with all its beautiful imperfections to a digitally airbrushed model on the cover of a magazine. It is an unwinnable game designed to make us feel inadequate, to make us feel that we are somehow failing at the project of life. The emotional consequences of living in this state of constant comparison are devastating. It is a major driver of the anxiety, depression, and loneliness that are so rampant in our society. It generates a persistent, low-level feeling of being less than, of not measuring up. It creates a deep and painful envy, which, as we have seen, is the strange form of suffering that arises not from our own misfortune, but from another's good fortune. It isolates us from our peers, turning potential friends and allies into perceived rivals. It robs us of the ability to feel genuine joy for others, and it tarnishes our ability to feel genuine joy for ourselves. To find freedom, we must first recognize the game for what it is: a rigged and painful illusion, and then, with conscious intention, we must choose to stop playing. There is a simple and beautiful parable that illustrates the profound wisdom of non-comparison. Imagine a vast and beautiful garden filled with a great diversity of life. In one corner, a magnificent, deep red rose grows, its petals soft as velvet, its fragrance intoxicating. In another corner stands a tall, elegant white lily, a picture of purity and grace. Dotted throughout the field are humble, cheerful daisies, turning their simple, happy faces to the sun. And providing shade for all is a great and sturdy oak tree, its roots deep, its branches strong. The beauty of this garden lies precisely in its diversity, in the fact that each plant is expressing its own unique nature perfectly. Now, imagine if the rose spent all of its days wishing it had the lily's tall, elegant stature. Imagine if the daisy felt worthless because it did not possess the rose's complex beauty and intoxicating scent. Imagine if the lily looked upon the oak tree with envy, wishing for its strength and longevity. The garden would cease to be a place of beauty and would become a place of misery, striving, and self-rejection. Each plant would lose its own authentic glory in its futile attempt to become something it is not. A wise gardener does not judge the daisy for not being a rose. They appreciate the unique contribution of each. The spiritual path is the process of becoming a wise gardener of our own hearts. It is the journey of learning to appreciate our own unique nature with all its strengths and weaknesses, and to stop comparing ourselves to the other flowers in the garden. Our task is not to become a lily or an oak tree. It is to become the most vibrant, beautiful, and authentic rose that we can possibly be. The direct, practical antidote to the poison of envy and comparison is the cultivation of sympathetic joy, or mudita. Envy is the painful thought, "I want what you have," a thought which creates a sense of lack and separation. Mudita is the joyful thought, "I rejoice in what you have," a thought which creates a sense of connection and abundance. When you are scrolling through your social media feed and you see a post that triggers the familiar pang of envy, this is a precious opportunity for practice. The first step is to pause and mindfully acknowledge the feeling without judgment. Ah, there is the feeling of envy. I see you. This is what comparison feels like. The next step is to consciously pivot. With a gentle effort, try to find one thing about the other person's good fortune that you can genuinely feel happy about, for their sake. You might think, "She worked so hard for that success. It's wonderful that her efforts paid off." Or, "What a beautiful experience for them to have. May their joy continue and grow." This conscious shift from envy to mudita is a powerful act of mental alchemy. It liberates our own heart from the bitter, self-imposed prison of resentment and opens it to the shared joy of our common humanity. The ultimate solution to the habit of comparison is to make a fundamental shift in the direction of our attention. Instead of constantly looking outward at the lives of others, we must learn to consistently bring our focus back inward, to our own unique path. The only comparison that is ever truly skillful or motivating is to compare ourselves today to ourselves yesterday. Am I a little bit kinder this week than I was last week? Am I a little more patient? Am I a little more present? This is the only yardstick that matters. When we focus on our own process, on our own incremental growth, the achievements of others become irrelevant to our own sense of worth. We learn to find our satisfaction not in being better than someone else, but in the simple, wholesome feeling of becoming a better version of ourselves. Finally, we can deploy the wisdom of compassion as a powerful tool to dismantle the fantasy of another person's perfect life. When we look at someone's curated feed, we are only seeing a single, polished frame from their entire movie. We know nothing of their hidden battles, their private anxieties, their secret sorrows. The practice, in a moment of envy, is to consciously remind ourselves of this truth. The person with the perfect body may struggle with a painful relationship with food. The person with the perfect family may be grieving a profound loss we know nothing about. The person with the perfect career may be suffering from extreme stress and burnout. This is not about wishing them ill or reveling in their potential pain. It is a compassionate recognition of our shared humanity. It is the remembrance that no one is exempt from the first arrows of life. This dose of reality helps the idealized, envy-inducing fantasy to dissolve, replacing it with a more sober, balanced, and compassionate understanding. It reminds us that we are all just walking each other home, each on our own unique, beautiful, and difficult path. To let go of comparison is one of the greatest acts of kindness we can offer ourselves. It is the choice to step out of a game that we are guaranteed to lose. It is the courage to run our own race, at our own pace, on our own track. It is the liberating wisdom to turn away from the distracting and distorted images of other people's lives and to turn toward the rich, complex, challenging, and singular miracle of our own. As we draw near to the culmination of our journey, we have gathered a powerful array of tools and insights. We have learned to find our ground, to observe our minds, to open our hearts, and to engage with the world from a place of growing wisdom. We have accepted the chaotic and impermanent nature of life. The final question, then, is one of integration. How do all these practices come together to forge a new way of being in the world? What is the ultimate quality that allows a person not just to survive the storms of life, but to navigate them with grace, strength, and an open heart? The answer lies in the development of an unshakable inner resilience. Resilience is a word that is often misunderstood. It is not about building an impenetrable armor so that we never feel pain. It is not about becoming so tough that we are never knocked down by life's difficulties. Such a state is neither possible nor desirable. To be alive is to be vulnerable. No, true resilience is something far more dynamic and beautiful. It is the psychological and spiritual elasticity that allows us to be struck by adversity, to feel its full impact, and then to bounce back, often with greater wisdom and strength than we had before. It is the art of learning from our suffering, rather than being defined by it. This section is about how all the threads of our practice weave together to create this essential, life-affirming quality. To grasp the nature of resilience, consider the simple parable of the tennis ball and the egg. Imagine holding a raw, uncooked egg in one hand and a tennis ball in the other. Both are self-contained objects. Now, imagine dropping both of them from a height of 6 feet onto a hard floor. They are subjected to the exact same external force, the same first arrow of impact. The egg, whose defining characteristic is its rigidity and brittleness, hits the ground and shatters. Its structure is irrevocably broken. It cannot put itself back together. It is a mess of yolk and fractured shell. The tennis ball, however, is made of a different nature. Its defining characteristic is its flexible, yielding elasticity. When it hits the ground, it does not resist the force. It yields to it, compressing to absorb the full impact. And then, in the next moment, it uses the very energy of that impact to bounce back up, its form and integrity completely intact. The untrained, reactive mind is like the egg. When it is struck by the force of adversity, a sudden loss, a harsh criticism, a major life crisis, it shatters. It breaks into pieces of anger, of despair, of self-pity, of blame. It becomes a mess, and the recovery is long and difficult. The resilient mind is like the tennis ball. It feels the full impact of the adversity. It does not deny the pain, but it has an inner spaciousness, a psychological flexibility that allows it to absorb the shock without shattering. It yields, it learns, and it uses the energy of the experience to bounce back, often with a newfound perspective and strength. The entire purpose of our practice is to transform the fundamental nature of our minds, from being like the fragile egg to being like the resilient tennis ball. This resilience is not a mysterious, innate trait that some people are born with and others are not. Modern psychology and contemplative wisdom agree. Resilience is a skill, and it is built upon a foundation of other learnable skills. We can think of it as a structure supported by 4 great pillars, all of which we have been diligently cultivating throughout our journey. The first and most fundamental pillar is mindfulness. This is the bedrock of awareness. Resilience begins with the ability to see a difficult situation clearly, without the immediate, distorting overlay of the second arrow. When adversity strikes, mindfulness allows us to pause and assess the reality of the situation. It allows us to feel the clean pain of the first arrow, the fear, the grief, the disappointment as pure energy in the body, without being immediately hijacked by a catastrophic story about what it all means. This clarity prevents us from shattering into 1,000 pieces of reactivity. It keeps our rational mind online and allows us to respond to the challenge from a place of wisdom rather than panic. The second pillar is self-compassion. This is our internal paramedic, our own first response team. In the moments after the tennis ball hits the ground, when we are feeling the shock and the sting of adversity, self-compassion is the practice of treating our own pain with kindness and care. Instead of meeting our fall with the harsh inner critic that berates us for being weak or for failing, we meet it with the gentle voice of a loving friend. We offer ourselves warmth and understanding. We soothe our own agitated nervous system. This compassionate internal response is what allows us to get back up. It is the emotional first aid that prevents the initial impact from turning into a lasting trauma. Without self-compassion, every fall feels like a confirmation of our own inadequacy, and we become afraid to ever try again. With self-compassion, every fall becomes an opportunity to practice kindness and to learn. The third pillar is connection, or what the Buddhist tradition calls Sangha. Resilience is not a solo project. While our work is internal, our strength is magnified by our connection to others. Knowing that we are part of a supportive community, that there are people in our lives who we can turn to when we are struggling, acts as a powerful safety net. It is the difference between the tennis ball bouncing on hard, unforgiving concrete versus bouncing on a springy, supportive court. A sense of belonging and the ability to ask for help are essential components of a resilient life. This connection reminds us of our shared humanity, that we are not alone in our struggles, and it provides us with the encouragement and perspective we need when our own feels lost. The fourth and final pillar is purpose. This is our connection to a sense of meaning and value that is larger than our own personal comfort or pleasure. This is our why. When we are living a life that is aligned with our deepest values, whether that is service to our family, creativity in our work, stewardship of the environment, or the pursuit of wisdom, we have a powerful reason to get back up when we are knocked down. A sense of purpose is the northern star that guides us through the darkest nights. It reminds us that our personal struggles are part of a larger, more meaningful journey. This is the wisdom of wise action. It gives us the fortitude to endure almost any hardship because we know that our efforts matter. In addition to strengthening these 4 pillars, there is a powerful and proactive practice we can engage in to build our reserves of resilience. It is the practice of consciously savoring the good. Because of our brain's negativity bias, we are great at learning from our bad experiences, but terrible at learning from our good ones. A negative event can stick in our minds for days, while a positive one is often fleeting and forgotten in moments. We must consciously counteract this bias. The practice, developed by the neuropsychologist Rick Hanson, is simple. Throughout your day, actively look for small, positive experiences. It could be the taste of your morning coffee, a moment of connection with a colleague, the satisfaction of completing a task, or the simple beauty of a cloud in the sky. When you notice one of these micro delights, do not just rush past it. Pause. For just 15 to 30 seconds, consciously savor the experience. Feel the pleasant feeling in your body. Really let it sink in. And as you do, form the gentle intention that this positive experience is being woven into the fabric of your being, becoming a lasting inner resource. To do this is like making small, regular deposits into your emotional and psychological bank account. You are building up a storehouse of inner strength, a buffer of positive neural pathways. Then, when the inevitable difficulties of life arise, when you have to make a withdrawal, you have a deep reserve of inner goodness to draw upon. You are not running on empty. Ultimately, we must come to see that resilience is not something we either have or do not have. It is a set of skills. And like any skill learning, to play the piano, to speak a foreign language, to cook a millet, can be learned and developed through consistent and patient practice. No one is born with unshakable resilience. It is forged in the fires of life through the conscious application of mindfulness, compassion, connection, and purpose. Every time you choose to meet a difficult moment with a conscious breath instead of a reaction, you are building resilience. Every time you respond to your own failure with a voice of kindness instead of criticism, you are building resilience. Every time you reach out to a friend for support, you are building resilience. Every time you savor a small moment of joy, you are building resilience. This is the most hopeful of all truths. It means that no matter how fragile or broken you may feel right now, you possess the innate capacity to change, to heal, and to grow stronger. This is the ultimate fruit of the entire spiritual path, the transformation of our very being from the fragile egg, shattered by the world, into the resilient tennis ball, capable of meeting any and all of life's experiences with a flexible, strong, courageous, and open heart. We began this long journey together with a single, urgent intention: to find a way to survive the storms of a chaotic world. We pictured ourselves as a lone sailor in a small boat, tossed on a turbulent sea, seeking only to find a safe harbor, a moment of peace for ourselves. We have learned to strengthen our vessel, to mend its sails, to drop a heavy anchor in the present moment, and to navigate the waves with growing skill and resilience. We have built an inner sanctuary, and now we arrive at the final, beautiful, and most meaningful turn of the path. The journey is not complete when we have simply found our own peace. The ultimate fruition of all our practice, the final purpose of building our inner monastery, is to discover that our own sanctuary can become a refuge for others. This is the shift from seeking peace to being peace. It is not a new task we must add to our list. It is the natural, effortless, and radiant consequence of all the inner work we have done. A lamp that has been lit does not need to try to shine. Its nature is to radiate light. A heart that has found its own center does not need to try to be calm. Its very presence begins to radiate stillness into the world. This final chapter is about understanding and gently embracing this new role, to become a source of peace in a turbulent world. To understand how this happens, we must recognize that we are not isolated islands of consciousness. We are deeply interconnected beings, constantly influencing each other on a subtle energetic level. Our nervous systems are in a state of continuous, unspoken dialogue. We have all had the experience of walking into a room where an argument has just occurred. Even if no one is speaking, the air feels thick with tension. We feel it in our own bodies. This is because anxiety, anger, and panic are contagious. When we are surrounded by people who are in a state of fight or flight, their agitated energy is transmitted to us through their tone of voice, their body language, their very presence. Our own mirror neurons fire in sympathy, and our nervous system begins to resonate with their agitation. But what is so often overlooked is that the reverse is also profoundly true. Calm is also contagious. When one person in a tense meeting, a difficult family gathering, or a chaotic situation remains grounded, centered, and non-reactive, their stable presence has a powerful regulating effect on everyone around them. They become, in effect, an external parasympathetic nervous system for the group. Their calm breath, their relaxed posture, and their spacious awareness send out a silent, powerful signal that says, "It is safe here. You can stand down." Think of the calm and reassuring flight attendant during a bout of severe turbulence. Their steady presence does more to soothe the passenger's fear than any announcement from the cockpit. Think of a skilled emergency room doctor in the midst of a crisis. Their ability to remain clear and focused amidst the chaos is what allows them to save lives. Think of a wise grandparent who can soothe a crying grandchild, not with frantic activity, but simply by holding them in their peaceful, loving arms. This is not a magical power. It is the natural effect of a well-regulated inner world radiating outward. As we dedicate ourselves to our own practice, to returning to the breath, to inhabiting the body, to meeting our own difficult emotions with compassion, we are, without even trying, developing this very capacity. We become the person in the room who does not get swept away by the collective panic. We become the one who can listen without reacting. We become a quiet, stable anchor for the people in our lives. Our own personal practice of finding peace becomes our greatest gift to the world. This leads to a profound state of freedom. At the beginning of our journey, our own inner peace was fragile and highly conditional. We needed the world around us to be quiet in order for our minds to be quiet. We needed other people to be kind and agreeable for us to feel calm. We needed life to go our way. Our well-being was held hostage by external circumstances. The entire journey of this path has been one of systematically severing this unhealthy dependency. By learning to anchor in the breath, we have found a peace that is independent of the noise outside. By learning to meet our difficult emotions with compassion, we have found a strength that is not dependent on always feeling good. By cultivating equanimity, we have found a stability that is not shaken by the world's praise or blame. The result of this training is that we learn to carry our own inner weather with us. We have built an inner shelter that is so well constructed that we can take it anywhere. The storm of the chaotic world can continue to rage. The winds can howl, the waves can crash, but they no longer have the power to destroy the deep and quiet peace at our center. This is the unshakable peace that the path has always promised. It is a peace that is portable, durable, and truly, unconditionally our own. The perfect symbol for this entire journey, from the struggle in the mud to the blossoming in the light, is the lotus flower. The life of the lotus begins deep down in the darkness, its roots anchored in the thick, smelly, chaotic mud at the bottom of a pond. This mud represents the world of suffering, the greed, the hatred, the confusion, the chaos of our ordinary human existence. This is where we all begin. But deep within the lotus seed is an innate, instinctual yearning for the light. And so, it begins its journey. It sends a single, determined stalk upward, pushing its way through the murky, unclear waters. This is the journey of the spiritual path, the diligent practice of navigating the confusion of our own minds. Finally, after its long journey, the stalk breaks the surface of the water, and there, in the clean air and the open sunlight, the bud opens into a flower of breathtaking beauty and perfection. And here is the miracle. Though it has grown up from the mud and traveled through the murky water, the blossom itself is pristine, radiant, and completely unstained. Its petals repel the water and the dirt. It is nourished by the mud, but it is not defined by it. To become a source of peace in a turbulent world is to become this lotus flower. We do not need to escape the mud of the world. We do not need to pretend the chaos and suffering do not exist. In fact, we must stay rooted in it, for it is the very source of the nutrients that allow us to grow. We remain engaged with our messy, difficult, beautiful world, but we cultivate a mind and heart, a consciousness that can rise above the turmoil and blossom in the clear light of wisdom and compassion. We learn to be in the world, but not of the world. Our peace is no longer stained by the mud of our circumstances. From this place of transcendent beauty, the lotus then offers its fragrance and its presence freely to all beings, becoming a source of inspiration and peace for the entire pond. This is our potential. This is our calling. The final and most beautiful turn of the wheel is the realization that the search for our own peace was, all along, the training for how to offer peace to others. The ultimate purpose of healing ourselves is to become a source of healing for the world. The journey, therefore, comes full circle. We began as a lone sailor, desperately seeking a safe harbor for our own small boat. We end as the lighthouse itself, a steady, unwavering light that offers guidance and refuge to all the other boats tossed on the stormy sea. This is not a burden we must take on, but a joy that arises naturally from a peaceful heart. You do not need to save the world. You only need to tend to the garden of your own mind, to build the monastery within your own heart. And by doing so, you will discover that your own peace, your own stillness, your own love is the greatest and most generous gift you could ever offer to this beautiful, chaotic, and aching world. We began this journey together, adrift in a small boat, tossed on the chaotic waves of the modern world, feeling overwhelmed and at the mercy of the storm. We have traveled far since then. We learned to see that our greatest suffering came not from the storm itself, but from our own reactive minds, from the second arrows of fear and anger we fired at ourselves. And so, we set about building a stronger boat. We learned to find the solid ground of the body and the ever-present anchor of the breath. We learned to be more mindful of the information we consume and to find moments of profound sanctuary in the most ordinary of daily tasks. We then turned to the heart, discovering the resilient power of self-compassion, the connective strength of compassion for others, and the radical act of seeking joy even in dark times. Finally, armed with these tools, we learn to face the nature of the storm itself, its impermanence, and its uncertainty not with fear, but with the wisdom of equanimity and the quiet agency of skillful action. We learned that the goal was never to wait for the storm to pass. The goal was to learn how to live, and even thrive, within it. The single greatest truth that this entire path reveals is this: peace is not the absence of chaos. If we wait for the world to become peaceful before we allow ourselves to be at peace, we will be waiting forever. Peace is not a destination we arrive at. It is a capacity we build within. It is the ability to maintain our own inner center, our own deep quietude. Even when the winds of the world are howling, we cannot control the ocean, but we can, with practice, become masterful sailors. Our greatest power, our most profound freedom, lies not in the futile attempt to control the uncontrollable world outside, but in the liberating skill of learning to regulate our own inner world. This is the ultimate refuge, a sanctuary that, once built, can never be taken from you. The tools for this great work are now in your hands. The map has been shared, but they are only useful if they are put into practice, day by day, moment by moment. The journey to a more peaceful life does not begin with a grand gesture, but with the very next conscious breath you take. It continues with the next moment you choose compassion over judgment, patience over frustration, or gratitude over complaint. Each of these small, conscious choices is a quiet act of rebellion against the chaos. Each is a vote cast for a saner and kinder world, starting with the world within your own heart. The journey does not end here. It begins now, with the very next step you take, on the sacred ground of your own life.